pain, so much pain. An agonizing pain spread throughout Zhang Yi's entire body. This wasn't just a feeling, but a harsh reality happening to him. He was being greedily dismembered by the friends and neighbors he had once trusted and helped. In this resource-scarce apocalypse, they disregarded his past kindness and raised their butcher knives against him. As he lay dying, he vaguely saw Feng Yuqing, the goddess in his heart, standing at the back of the crowd, looking pitiful as she shouted, "I told him to open the door. You have to save me a rib to make soup." It was this woman who had tricked Zhang Yi into opening the door, leading to his death. Looking at her, his eyes were filled with hatred and regret. He could only blame himself for being too foolish, too kind, ultimately becoming food for others in this apocalyptic world. How he wished he could do it all over again. Next time, he wouldn't show mercy to anyone and would only live for himself. Zhang Yi's vision quickly faded to black, and he lost consciousness. However, in the next moment, he abruptly opened his eyes and sat up from the sofa. The hellish scene he had just experienced, the terrible pain, was still vivid in his mind. He gasped for breath, his entire body quickly drenched in sweat. What's going on? Wasn't I killed by those beastly neighbors? After regaining his senses, Zhang Yi began to examine his surroundings. This place was not unfamiliar. It was his own apartment. However, the comfortable temperature in the air surprised him, because in December 2050, Earth was hit by a global Cambrian storm caused by a supernova explosion 500,000 light-years away. Global temperatures plummeted. The daily temperature in Tianhai City, where Zhang Yi lived, was around -60 to -70 degrees Celsius, and heavy snow had been falling continuously for a month, burying the entire city. It was said that in northern China, the temperature even reached a terrifying -100 degrees Celsius, and the Earth was completely buried under ice and snow. A large number of species went extinct, and even more than 95% of the human population perished in this disaster. Zhang Yi stood up and took a bottle of water from the refrigerator, gulping down more than half of it. Although the refrigerated water was cold, to him now it was like nectar. During the apocalypse, the only way to get water was to brave the extreme -60 to -70 degree temperatures and dig snow to melt. Such a task could easily freeze someone to death. After finishing the water, Zhang Yi checked his phone. It displayed the date, November 12th, a full month before the apocalypse. "It seems I've been reborn." Zhang Yi took a deep breath, quickly understanding what had happened. The experience of that 1 month couldn't have been a dream, especially the pain of being dismembered. It was too real. Zhang Yi raised his head, feeling immensely fortunate after surviving this ordeal. At the same time, a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. He clearly remembered those who had harmed him. In this life, he would live well and wouldn't show any kindness to those beasts. However, in the next moment, Zhang Yi began to think about how to prepare for the apocalypse. His parents had passed away years ago, leaving him a 120 square meter apartment in Tianhai City. He also had over 2 million in savings, which seemed quite comfortable under normal circumstances. However, with the coming apocalypse, there would be a global shortage of resources. With just this little money, he wouldn't last long. After all, surviving required a massive amount of supplies. Zhang Yi not only wanted to survive, but also maintain a certain quality of life. He needed to consider both food and entertainment. Otherwise, his mental state would eventually collapse. Just then, a streak of white light suddenly appeared before Zhang Yi's eyes. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him and reached out to rub them. At that moment, a strange thought surged into his mind. It seemed that this streak of white light was a part of him, and information about the white light appeared in his mind. With a thought, Zhang Yi's consciousness instantly entered the white light. He found himself in an enormous white space. He didn't know how vast it was, only that it was largely empty. This is a different dimension. It seems that after being reborn, I've gained some special abilities. Zhang Yi's heart leaped with joy. It seemed the gamma rays had given him special powers. With this huge space, storing supplies for the apocalypse would be much easier. However, Zhang Yi wanted to know how much this space could hold and whether there were any restrictions on the items he could store. His consciousness immediately returned to his apartment, and he began to try putting things from his home into the space. He started with teacups and basins, easily placing them inside. Then he tried larger appliances: TV, refrigerator, washing machine, computer, air conditioner, vacuum cleaner. The white space accepted everything without hesitation. Moreover, with just a thought, Zhang Yi could retrieve any item from the space. He was overjoyed. With this huge space, I can store a massive amount of resources. He licked his lips, a bold plan forming in his mind. Zhang Yi worked as a supervisor in the South China warehouse of Walmart. As the world's largest supermarket, Walmart had all kinds of goods. It had 3 giant warehouses in China: Central, South, and North. The supplies in these 3 warehouses were enough to supply tens of millions of people in several cities for a week. In other words, if Zhang Yi emptied an entire warehouse and moved all the supplies into his space, he wouldn't just have enough for a lifetime, but for 10 lifetimes. Most importantly, Walmart's warehouse didn't stock low-quality goods. Whether it was food, general merchandise, or luxury goods, everything was name brand and of high quality. If Zhang Yi could empty a Walmart warehouse, he could live better than a god, regardless of the apocalypse or anything else. As a warehouse supervisor, Zhang Yi was incredibly familiar with every shelf, surveillance device, and staff schedule in the warehouse. Emptying the warehouse wouldn't be difficult for him. Having made up his mind, Zhang Yi felt much more relaxed. Grumbled just then, his stomach growled in protest. Zhang Yi touched his stomach and glanced at the takeout on the table. Without hesitation, he picked it up and threw it in the trash. The apocalypse is coming in a month. I need to eat all the good things quickly, or I won't have a chance later. What was the point of keeping money? After the apocalypse, money would become worthless paper. It was better to spend it all now than to waste it. Zhang Yi turned around Shalsada, preparing to find a Michelin 3-star restaurant and enjoy a good meal. Zhang Yi stepped out of his house. The scene outside was peaceful, full of worldly joy and comfort. Many parents were playing with their children in the community square, their faces full of happy smiles. But Zhang Yi knew that in a month, all of this would disappear. He quickly walked out of the community. Not far from it was a 3 Michelin-starred Western restaurant. A meal there cost at least 5 or 6,000 yuan, and Zhang Yi had always been reluctant to eat there. But now he didn't care. After entering the restaurant, Zhang Yi found a window seat and ordered all the most expensive dishes on the menu, along with a bottle of Lafite. This set him back 50,000 yuan. Even the waiters in the restaurant looked at him with ambiguous eyes, thinking he must be a rich second generation. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person eat such an expensive meal? Zhang Yi didn't care what others thought. When a table full of delicious food was served, he started stuffing it into his mouth. Perhaps because he had experienced 6 months of the icy apocalypse, he was so moved by this delicious food that he almost burst into tears. So his eating became a bit ferocious, attracting the attention and whispers of the surrounding diners. Zhang Yi ignored them. He knew that after the apocalypse arrived, people would even kneel and kowtow for a packet of instant noodles. At that time, all civilization and morality would vanish. While Zhang Yi was eating in the restaurant, a woman passing by outside stopped. She was a woman with long flowing hair, exquisite makeup, and Gucci high heels. It was Fang Yuqing, the woman who had killed Zhang Yi in his previous life. And beside her was her best friend, Li Kaining. When the two passed by the Michelin-starred restaurant, they couldn't help but take a few extra glances. They had always longed for this kind of luxurious place. Unfortunately, their finances didn't allow them to splurge here. But this didn't stop them from looking inside with appraising eyes. Perhaps they could find a high-quality, rich second generation to snag. Then, Fang Yuqing was surprised to find Zhang Yi inside, with a table full of top-notch food in front of him. "Isn't that Zhang Yi? How can he afford to eat here?" Fang Yuqing said in surprise. Lin Kaining also covered her mouth in astonishment. "Zhang Yi, was he this rich all along?" As she spoke, she gave Fang Yuqing an ambiguous look and then smiled. "Yuqing, you're so lucky. That simp who's chasing you is actually a hidden rich kid. Look at that table of food. It must be at least 50 or 60,000. Who can afford to eat such an expensive meal? Lin Caning's tone was envious. She knew that Zhang Yi had been pursuing Fang Yuqing for half a year. However, Fang Yuqing had been stringing Zhang Yi along, neither rejecting nor accepting him. Fang Yuqing was a complete gold digger. She always believed she could marry a high-quality, rich second generation and become a pampered wife. But she was also reluctant to give up Zhang Yi, who owned a car and a house in Tianhai City. So, Fang Yuqing had always considered Zhang Yi as a backup. But seeing Zhang Yi enjoying a luxurious meal worth tens of thousands of yuan alone made Fang Yuqing suspicious. Could it be that Zhang Yi is actually a hidden rich kid? Fang Yuqing pondered, resting her chin on her hand. The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Right, don't they often have this kind of person in TV dramas? They're clearly very rich, but in order to find true love, they pretend to be ordinary people. Fang Yuqing convinced herself, her eyes brightening. If that were true, she would save herself a lot of effort. After all, Zhang Yi had been pursuing her, and she felt that as long as she nodded, Zhang Yi would immediately propose to her. Lin Caning also urged, Yuqing, let's go in and find Zhang Yi. Actually, she was eyeing the table full of delicious food. This was a 3-Michelin-starred restaurant. Ordinary people wouldn't have a chance to taste the food here in their lifetime. Fang Yuqing hesitated, then shook her head and said, That's not good. It'll make him think I'm a gold digger. Let's wait outside and pretend to run into him by chance. Fang Yuqing wasn't stupid. She wouldn't lower herself for a meal. Even if Zhang Yi was really rich, she had to maintain her goddess-like demeanor. Only then, after they were together, could she properly control Zhang Yi and keep him as her simp. So the two hid near the restaurant, waiting for Zhang Yi to come out. Zhang Yi ate for more than an hour, happily rubbing his round belly. Next, he planned to buy some supplies from a nearby supermarket. Although he was very confident he could transport supplies from the Walmart warehouse, it was better to be safe than sorry. It was better to prepare some supplies in advance in case of any accidents. After all, he had experienced hunger and couldn't tolerate any unexpected events. Zhang Yi paid the bill cheerfully and walked out of the restaurant under the waiter's attentive smile. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded beside him. Zhang Yi, what a coincidence! Zhang Yi turned his head and saw Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning. Fang Yuqing tucked her hair behind her ear, deliberately revealing her white neck and pink earlobe. Zhang Yi sneered inwardly. This kind of routine was a classic green tea tactic. The point was to inadvertently make men's hearts flutter. Fang Yuqing, this top-tier green tea and white lotus, was naturally well-versed in this. Unfortunately, Zhang Yi was no longer the naive simp he once was. After all, not long ago, this woman had caused him to lose his life, and she even wanted to break his ribs and make soup out of them. Thinking of this, Zhang Yi's gaze suddenly turned cold, a naked killing intent. Anyway, the apocalypse was coming soon, and even if he killed her, there wouldn't be any consequences. Fang Yuqing was chilled by Zhang Yi's gaze and nervously said, Zhang Yi, what's wrong? Zhang Yi quickly restrained his gaze and said indifferently, Nothing. I mistook you for someone else. He suddenly changed his mind. Letting this woman die so easily was too cheap for her. It would be better to let her experience the despair of the apocalypse before using his methods to play her to death. With his foreknowledge and memories from his previous life, Zhang Yi had plenty of time to prepare and 100 ways to make her die painfully. So now, there was no need to deal with her. The most important thing now was to build the safest shelter so he could survive comfortably and safely in the apocalypse. Zhang Yi's attitude towards Fang Yuqing was extremely cold. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning sensed something was off. However, mistakenly believing Zhang Yi to be a hidden rich kid, not only were they not angered by his attitude, they proactively approached him. Hey, Zhang Yi, were you just eating at that restaurant? Lin Caning asked casually. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. This woman was no good either, birds of a feather with Fang Yuqing. They had both played a part in stealing his food and ultimately causing his death in the past life. Yeah, Zhang Yi replied coldly, then shoved his hands in his pockets and turned towards the supermarket. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning hurried after him. Zhang Yi, where are you going? Fang Yuqing asked with a gentle smile. To the supermarket. Zhang Yi's voice remained cold, laced with impatience. If he didn't want her to experience the despair of the apocalypse, he would have killed her already. Fang Yuqing gave Lin Caning a look and quickly said, What a coincidence. We're also going to buy some things. We're going the same way. Zhang Yi now understood. They must have seen him eating at the Michelin 3-star restaurant and mistaken him for some hidden rich kid. That was why they were suddenly so enthusiastic towards him. He didn't bother saying anything to them and walked straight towards the supermarket. But the more he acted like this, the more Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning believed he was rich. Otherwise, why would he act so arrogantly? The two followed Zhang Yi, Fang Yuqing staying close to him, sometimes deliberately brushing against him. When Zhang Yi looked at her, she would shyly turn her head away, blushing as if very bashful. Zhang Yi sneered inwardly. Two-faced, what a performance. You could win an Oscar. Zhang Yi entered the supermarket, grabbed a cart, and headed inside. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning quickly followed with their own carts. Zhang Yi, were you eating with someone? Fang Yuqing asked with a smile. Zhang Yi walked towards the food aisle and said coldly, Can I eat by myself? Fang Yuqing's eyes lit up. Oh, that's not what I meant. It's just that the food there is quite expensive. I thought you were treating someone. Lin Caning couldn't help but ask. Zhang Yi, your monthly salary is only a little over 10,000, right? That meal must have cost you half a year's salary. Seems like your family left you quite a bit of money. Fang Yuqing glared at Lin Caning. Idiot. How could you ask such a thing? The most important rule for a top-tier gold digger. Talk about feelings with the rich, talk about money with the poor. Realizing her mistake, Lin Caning quickly tried to recover. I was just kidding. We're all good friends, money doesn't matter. Zhang Yi ignored them completely. He arrived at the food aisle and looked at the dazzling array of goods on the shelves as if he had entered a treasure trove. In his past life, he had experienced what it was like to eat one pack of instant noodles over 2 days. Therefore, he had an infinite yearning for food. Zhang Yi walked directly to the shelves and started loading food into his cart. Sausages, instant noodles, self-heating hot pots, and seasonings, he bought them in bulk. This stunned Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning. Zhang Yi, what are you buying so much food for? Are you going camping? Yeah, Zhang Yi replied indifferently. 3 shopping carts full of supplies were pushed back to the apartment complex by Zhang Yi and his 2 companions. Many neighbors witnessed this scene along the way and couldn't help but gossip. Zhang Yi wasn't afraid of being seen. Some neighbors had already spotted him while he was shopping at the supermarket. Besides, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning would definitely spread the word later. There was no point in hiding. He had even anticipated that when the apocalypse arrived, many people would try to break into his home and steal his supplies. He had experienced all of this firsthand. However, he wasn't afraid because, this time, he would be prepared. He wanted those people to see what he had, but be unable to get it, leaving them fuming with anger. Zhang Yi, Fang Yuqing, and Lin Caning lived in the same apartment building. Because Zhang Yi worked in the Walmart warehouse as a manager, neighbors often asked him to help them buy discounted items. Therefore, everyone knew him. Seeing the 3 of them return with so many things, an elderly woman who was out playing with her grandson approached them. Looking at the food in the carts, including fresh beef and lamb, she was tempted. Xiao Zhang, why did you bring back so much? Is it clearance from the warehouse? You can't possibly use all of this. Why don't you share some with your neighbors? This was Annie Lin, who worked for the residence committee. She often bossed around the neighbors, acting like a leader, relying on her small amount of authority in the complex. She often asked Zhang Yi to buy discounted goods for her, always looking for a bargain. In the previous life, she had also pestered Zhang Yi for food. But when all the neighbors rushed into his home to loot, not only did she not stop them, but she was even more energetic than the younger ones. Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning didn't want to provoke this woman and quickly said, These things are all Zhang Yi's. We're just helping him bring them back. Auntie Lin's eyes immediately shifted to Zhang Yi, and she said with a smile, Xiao Zhang, it seems these are from your warehouse. How about sharing a little with Annie Lin? As she spoke, her grandson, Xiao Hu, had already climbed onto a shopping cart and reached for a box of chocolates. He might be small, but his eyes were sharp. That box of imported chocolate cost over 200 yuan at the supermarket. Without a word, Zhang Yi snatched the chocolates back. Then he coldly said to Annie Lin, "I'm sorry, I'm keeping these for myself." The apocalypse was imminent, and he couldn't even be bothered to be polite. Annie Lin's expression suddenly changed. You! Zhang Yi's lack of respect for her, the community leader, made her very angry, especially since her grandson, Xiao Hu, started crying for the chocolate after Zhang Yi pulled him away. The child doesn't know any better. Why don't you just give him a box of chocolate? Consider it bought by me. I'll give you the money later, Annie Lin said in a low voice. Zhang Yi just sneered. Everyone used mobile payments now. It was incredibly convenient. Her saying she would pay him back later clearly meant she intended to welch on the debt. I said, "These are for me. If you want some, go buy them yourself," Zhang Yi sneered, then beckoned Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning to leave. As soon as they left, Annie Lin's curses rang out behind them. Zhang Yi ignored her. Annie Lin's son and daughter-in-law worked out of town, leaving her alone to take care of her grandson. The old woman only bought enough groceries for one day at a time. So, when the apocalypse arrived, their supplies would be the first to run out. In his past life, Zhang Yi had been kind enough to help them. But this time, without his help, it would be a miracle if this immoral old woman and her mischievous grandson, Xiao Hu, survived for even 10 days. Zhang Yi didn't want to argue with a corpse. It wasn't that he was heartless, but when that day came, everyone would struggle just to take care of themselves. The lives of others would naturally be secondary. After bringing all 3 carts of supplies home, Zhang Yi let Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning leave. "Zhang Yi, don't forget to treat us." Fang Yuqing winked playfully at Zhang Yi. But Zhang Yi felt a wave of nausea upon seeing this. He gave a perfunctory response. The 2 women had initially planned to stay, hoping to find clues that Zhang Yi was a hidden rich kid. But seeing his lack of interest in entertaining them, they had to leave. After they left, Zhang Yi opened his dimensional space and stored everything inside. He wanted to observe whether these supplies would change inside the space. After finishing this, it was already late. Zhang Yi didn't rush to rest but took out a pen and paper, meticulously planning his preparations for the next month. Although he was usually lazy, when it came to survival, people could always find the potential within themselves. To live comfortably in the apocalypse, I first need to solve the food problem. This is easy to handle. Besides what I usually buy, the rest can be taken from the warehouse. But I can't rush this. I need to investigate first. And I need to take them a few days before the apocalypse to avoid attracting attention. If I get caught, I definitely won't survive a few days in jail. Zhang Yi wrote down food on the paper and ticked it off. Then there's heating. After the apocalypse, energy supply will be extremely scarce, and air conditioning will soon be unusable. So I have to use the simplest method. A fireplace is the first choice. Fireplaces and heated brick beds worked on similar principles, using primitive methods for heating. European winters were particularly cold, and they used this method to get through the long, harsh season. In that case, I need to renovate the house, preferably adding insulation. Thinking about the renovations, Zhang Yi remembered how his house had been broken into in his past life, and his heart tightened. I also need to turn my home into an impenetrable fortress. First, reinforce all the walls with thick steel plates, at least enough to withstand ordinary explosions. After the apocalypse, people would do anything to survive, so he had to be fully prepared. He couldn't risk his life. Zhang Yi had already tasted death once and never wanted to experience it again. The safe house issue was also easy to solve. Tianhai City had security companies specializing in protection for the wealthy. They offered services to build safe rooms. Zhang Yi remembered that in his past life, a top tycoon had built a super bunker that could even withstand attacks from small-scale H-weapons. Next is medicine. I have to prevent myself from getting sick and being unable to get treatment. There are many common medications in the Walmart warehouse which can treat colds, fevers, and other minor illnesses. But these are far from enough. The Cambrian storm will last for at least a few decades. I need to be fully prepared. Fortunately, Zhang Yi had good connections in Tianhai City. As a warehouse manager, he also knew some staff from hospital warehouses. As long as he could offer enough money, he could get any medicine. After solving these problems, Zhang Yi tapped his pen on the paper. Next, there's one last problem to solve. His gaze sharpened. That is, weapons. When the apocalypse arrived, humanity would be lost, and battles over resources would be commonplace. Human life would be like grass. To survive, one must have enough force. Zhang Yi wasn't a martial arts expert, but even the best martial artist could be defeated by a knife. As long as he had powerful enough weapons, he wouldn't have to worry about this problem. Machetes, crowbars, and axes are easy to get. Crossbows, air guns, and compound bows also have channels. But the best, of course, is American Iaijutsu. This thing can only be obtained through the black market. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin. This problem couldn't be solved immediately. But he still had a month. As long as he was willing to spend money, there should be a way. He spent 3 hours formulating a perfect plan, then took a refreshing shower and lay down in his comfortable bed to sleep. The next morning, Zhang Yi got out of bed. He hadn't slept well. Nightmares had woken him several times. Waking up to find himself still in his warm, comfortable bed at home, he let out a long sigh of relief. The apocalypse had deeply traumatized him. To avoid repeating his past mistakes, Zhang Yi was even more determined to be fully prepared. After getting up, Zhang Yi made himself breakfast. Then he opened his dimensional space to check on the supplies he had put inside. To his delight, my dimensional space is independent of this world. Perhaps the rules of time are different. It's possible that the flow of time is slower, or even static. This is great news. This way, I can put all sorts of things inside without worry. However, when Zhang Yi checked the few fish he had put in, he found they were all dead. They looked lifelike after death and hadn't spoiled. Zhang Yi stroked his chin, understanding more about the rules of the dimensional space. Living things can't survive inside for long. It seems my idea of living inside myself isn't very practical. This wasn't a big problem. The dimensional space was a vast expanse of white, nowhere near as comfortable as his own home. As long as he could store things inside, that was enough. Thinking about this, many ideas came to Zhang Yi's mind. Since he could preserve fresh meat, vegetables, and fruits, what about cooked meals? Although Zhang Yi could cook, he was still far from a professional chef. Relying on his own cooking in the future would eventually get tiresome. So, Zhang Yi immediately called the largest 5-star hotel in Tianhai City. Hello, this is the Hong Fu Tianxia Hotel. How can I help you? Zhang Yi immediately said, I'm inviting guests to my home for a 3-day, 3-night banquet. So, I need to reserve 500 tables of food. The person on the other end was startled. 500 tables of food would take them a long time to prepare. Moreover, they were a 5-star hotel. The cheapest banquet would cost 3,000 to 4,000 yuan per table. 500 tables would be over 1 million yuan. The service staff didn't dare to make the decision and quickly said, Please hold on. I'll go ask our manager. After a while, another person picked up the phone. Hello, sir. I'm Chen Dingfang, the manager of Hong Fu Tianxia Hotel. May I know your name? Zhang Yi replied, My name is Zhang Yi. I want to book 500 tables for a banquet. Can you handle that? The manager was startled. Since the hotel opened, they had never encountered such a request. However, such a large order, if it came, they would definitely have to accept it. Mr. Zhang, 500 tables will cost over 1 million. If you need it, we will prepare it for you immediately, but you need to pay a deposit of 200,000 yuan in advance. Zhang Yi replied, No problem. Send me your account number later, and I'll transfer the money. With the money, things were naturally easier. The manager readily agreed, added Zhang Yi as a friend, and sent him the bank account number. Zhang Yi transferred 200,000 without hesitation. After confirming the arrival of the deposit with the finance department, the manager immediately began to give instructions to various departments. Quick, quick, quick. We have a big order. Tell the purchasing department to prepare the supplies quickly. The kitchen should stop accepting other takeout orders for the time being. We need to prepare 500 tables of banquet food within a day. On the other side, after hanging up the phone, Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. Although money will be useless in a month, it's still needed to buy things now. He had about 2 million in total, including the inheritance left by his parents and his own savings. Now half of it was gone, and to be honest, it hurt a little. But then he thought this is a good thing. Many people held a lot of money in their hands, which later turned into waste paper. Not everyone has the opportunity to spend their money. However, there are still many places where money is needed. I have to find a way to make money. Zhang Yi's eyes immediately fell on his house. The apartment was located in the middle ring of Tianhai City, with an area of 120 square meters, and the complex was built 10 years ago. According to the current market, it's worth over 40,000 yuan per square meter. In other words, this house is now worth at least 5 million. I've got it. I'll get a mortgage loan. Then I'll have money. Zhang Yi chuckled. He wouldn't have to repay this loan. It was incredibly convenient. He immediately left home and drove to the bank to apply for a loan. On the way, he received a message from Fang Yuqing. Zhang Yi, I'm so bored this weekend. I really wish someone could take me out for a stroll. Zhang Yi glanced at it and tossed his phone aside. He arrived at the bank and started the loan process. Because Zhang Yi's loan amount was large, his documents were complete, and the house was fully paid for. Zhang Yi didn't haggle. It was free money anyway, so he didn't have the time to argue with the bank. After readily signing the documents, the bank transferred the money to his account. Now, after spending over 1 million on the banquet, I still have about 5 million left. It should be enough to renovate the house. However, I still need to buy a large amount of medicine and weapons. This money may not be enough. Zhang Yi stroked his chin, thinking about how to get more money. Just then, a young man with yellow hair saw Zhang Yi lost in thought. His eyes lit up, and he immediately walked over. Hey, buddy, do you need money? Zhang Yi looked up at the yellow-haired young man. Who are you? The smile on the young man's face deepened, and he lowered his voice and asked, I'm just asking if you need money now, and the bank won't lend it to you? Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi understood what this person was doing. He must be a loan shark. An idea flashed in Zhang Yi's mind. He sighed and pretended to be troubled. Yes, my family's business is in urgent need of funds. But the bank? Zhang Yi said, deliberately showing a troubled expression. The yellow-haired young man also looked like he understood. Anyone who could borrow money from a bank through normal channels would not go to a loan shark. He said to Zhang, yeah, it's tough to borrow money from banks these days. So many rules and regulations, and the money is slow to come down. But brother, if you're in urgent need of money, I can help you. Zhang Yi looked at the yellow-haired young man cautiously. You? Can you really do it? I need several million. Hearing that it was a big deal, the yellow-haired young man's eyes became noticeably more excited. He took out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Zhang Yi. Our company specializes in helping people in times of crisis. As long as you need money, you can't go wrong with us. Zhang Yi glanced at it. The business card read Duo Loan Financial Services Co., Ltd., and the yellow-haired young man's title was Business Manager Hu Minghua. Zhang Yi said excitedly, Can you really lend me money? I need 5 million. As long as you can help me through this difficult time, I promise I can return the money within 3 months at most. Hu Minghua smiled. This is negotiable. Our company is very capable. We specialize in helping people like you who are short of funds. Let's go. We can discuss this matter slowly in our company. With a look of anticipation, Zhang Yi nodded and followed Hu Minghua to their company. The so-called company was located in a remote office building. After entering the door, Hu Minghua took Zhang Yi to their boss's office. The boss of this loan company looked burly but wore a branded Balino suit. He was clearly trying to create the image of a legitimate company. However, there was a hint of ruthlessness between his eyebrows. He wouldn't have that look if he hadn't struggled in society for many years. Hu Minghua introduced Zhang Yi's basic situation to the boss in front of him. Manager, this is the client who wants to borrow money from us. The boss's name was Chen Xiong. After seeing Zhang Yi, he smiled and invited Zhang Yi to sit down. Mr. Zhang, how much do you want to borrow? As expected of a loan shark company, The conversation was straightforward. Such companies were not formal, so there weren't so many rules and regulations. And they had ways to make you pay back the money. They weren't worried about you defaulting. Zhang Yi said, I want to borrow 5 million. Chen Xiong frowned. Oh, that's not a small amount. But Mr. Zhang, I'll tell you up front, our interest rates are very high. You need to be prepared. Hu Minghua added, Mr. Zhang's business urgently needs funds. Once the business turns around, this money can be earned back quickly, right? The two sang the same tune, and Zhang Yi took it all in. Zhang Yi still pretended to be anxious and said, Yes, I can pay it back soon. The interest can be a little higher, as long as you can lend me the money. A smile appeared on Chen Xiong's face. Good. Our interest rate is 4%. You borrow 5 million, you'll have to pay back 7 million. So, you need to give me a promissory note for 7 million first. Also, you must have something of sufficient value as collateral. A house, a factory, a car, anything works. Zhang Yi pretended to hesitate for a moment, then gritted his teeth and pulled out his property deed. He had taken it to the bank for a loan, and it just happened to be on him. This house of mine is worth over 5 million. It should be enough collateral for you. I also have a 300,000 Mercedes-Benz. You can take it if I can't pay you back. Chen Xiong, for the first time, met such a straightforward customer and quickly took the property deed to look it over. After seeing the information on Zhang Yi's house, he was even more satisfied. Because according to the current market price, that house could be sold for at least 5 million, plus a car. There was no way he could lose on this deal. However, Chen Xiong still pretended to be dissatisfied. Mr. Zhang, your house is worth at most 4 or 5 million, but wanted to take 5 million from me. I'm losing out a bit. Zhang Yi looked startled and said excitedly, Boss Chen, you must help me. I'm in desperate need of money right now. As long as you can transfer the money to me today, I only need 5 million. Chen Xiong and Hu Minghua exchanged glances, their eyes filled with amusement. Their business was taking advantage of people's desperation. The more urgently someone needed money, the more they would gouge them. No, this deal is really not worth it. Finally, after some bargaining, the two sides reached an agreement for 4 million. However, Zhang Yi demanded that the money must be transferred to his account today. Although loan sharks were unscrupulous, their efficiency was truly high. Perhaps this was their only advantage over banks. After signing the contract, Zhang Yi quickly received 4 million in cash in his account. He secretly laughed to himself. This money, to Chen Xiong, was like throwing meat buns to a dog, never to return. Why does that feel like I'm insulting myself? Zhang Yi happily left with the money. After he left, the office was filled with the boisterous laughter of Chen Xiong and Hu Minghua. That deal was really easy. That fool actually took the 4 million and left. Chen Xiong said triumphantly, We can earn at least 2 or 3 million from this. We don't have to worry about this month's performance. Hu Minghua leaned back in his chair and laughed. Boss, he signed the contract so readily. Could there be something wrong with that house? Chen Xiong held the property deed in his hand and said with a smile, This property deed is real. There's no problem. As long as the house is his, he can't escape. With the property deed and the 7 million IOU in hand, they would naturally have a way to get the house. Not only that, they had many more ways to completely drain Zhang Yi dry. Chen Xiong narrowed his eyes and took a graceful sip of coffee. If all else fails, we can contact a few overseas agencies and see if there are any valuable parts on him to sell. We never do business at a loss. Zhang Yi happily left the loan company. He looked back at the office building, a faint sneer playing on his lips. They're all good people, giving me money to spend for free. From now on, Zhang Yi would have nothing to do with Chen Xiong and Hu Minghua. Or rather, they were very likely to die in the apocalyptic cold wave a month later. Zhang Yi now had about 9 million in funds. It was completely enough to implement his plan. Zhang Yi drove to the famous Zhanlong Security Company in Tianhai City. Zhanlong was one of the largest security companies in China, specializing in providing security services for the wealthy and celebrities. Sometimes, even high-ranking government officials would hire them for assistance. The reason Zhang Yi sought them out was because in his past life, he had heard that Zhang Long had built a top-level safe house for the richest man in Jiangnan province. It was said that the real estate tycoon was still able to live comfortably during the apocalypse. The safe house built by Zhang Long played a significant role in that. Zhang Yi arrived at Zhang Long, explained his intentions to the receptionist, and was immediately ushered into a lounge by someone from the business department. The receptionist brought Zhang Yi a freshly ground coffee. Soon after, a burly man with a crew cut walked in. He was wearing a black suit, looking somewhat like a suit-wearing thug. It made one constantly worry that the suit would burst. However, it had to be said that seeing such a person would fill a client with a sense of security. "Hello, sir. My name is Wu Huiran. I'm the business department manager. What can we do for you?" Wu Huiran asked, sitting next to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi took a sip of coffee and said, "I need you to build me a safe house. The kind that can withstand the end of the world, the highest level safe house." Upon hearing this, Wu Huiran's eyes immediately became serious. If others heard these words, they would find it very funny, because no one would believe in any so-called end of the world. But for Zhang Long, this was no joke, because in this world, the richest and most powerful people were often the most afraid of death. Long ago, some wealthy individuals abroad spent billions of dollars building doomsday shelters. Over the years, many wealthy people around the world have begun to emulate this behavior. Some might genuinely fear large-scale natural disasters. Others simply had too many enemies and wanted to add a sense of security. In Zhang Long Securities, doomsday safe houses were naturally born to meet this market demand. When Wu Huiran heard Zhang Yi wanted to build a doomsday-level safe house, he immediately became more courteous. They didn't get many big orders like this every year. "Mr. Zhang, we at Zhang Long are a world-class security company. We can certainly meet your requirements." Wu Huiran took out a tablet and handed it to Zhang Yi. "Our services are all custom-made. You can choose the services you need from here, and the corresponding prices are listed." In the information age, communication was convenient. Zhang Yi took the tablet and began to carefully filter the services. It had to be said, a professional company was a professional company. As long as you had the money, Zhang Long Security could meet almost all your requirements, including building safe houses 100 meters underground and under the sea. However, these projects would take too long for Zhang Yi. He only had 1 month. After reading the introduction to the safe house, Zhang Yi immediately selected his services. First was whole house reinforcement. The materials of his entire house would be replaced. The walls, ceiling, and floor would all be replaced with 100 millimeters thick steel plates. The windows would be replaced with bulletproof plexiglass. Next was the ventilation system. Air filtration systems would be added throughout. No harmful gases would be able to enter from the outside. Finally, a complete surveillance system would provide comprehensive and seamless monitoring of the interior and exterior of the house. All doors would be replaced with heavy metal doors of the same material as bank vaults, making them nearly impossible to blast open even with explosives. In short, Zhang Yi only had one requirement: to turn his house into an absolutely impenetrable fortress. After ticking off these options, Zhang Yi handed the computer to Wu Huiran. After looking it over, Wu Huiran's eyes widened. A house of only 120 square meters was being built like a steel barrel. With the addition of weapons, this would practically be a large-scale fortress. Wu Huiran murmured. Hearing these words, Zhang Yi's eyes flickered. "Oh, you have experience with fortresses?" Wu Huiran chuckled. "I used to be a mercenary abroad, so I'm quite familiar with military knowledge." A flash of inspiration struck Zhang Yi. He lowered his voice and asked Wu Huiran, "Then do you have a way to get guns?" This question made Wu Huiran's expression turn serious. In China, private gun ownership is prohibited. "Mr. Zhang, you should understand that in principle, that kind of thing is not allowed for private citizens," Wu Huiran whispered. "Have you encountered some terrifying enemy that has made you so afraid?" Zhang Yi seized the opportunity. "Yes, I've offended some dangerous people. They're ruthless, and they have guns. I was thinking, is there any way I could get some guns for self-defense? I can't just hide in my house and get beaten up Can I? Wu Huiren chuckled. Mr. Zhang, I'm afraid I can't help you with that. We're a legitimate company. But from Wu Huiren's eyes, Zhang Yi could tell that it wasn't that he couldn't get guns, but that he didn't want to get involved in trouble. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. Then he said to Wu Huiren, this safe house project will cost me over 8 million yuan. If something happens to me later, it won't be good for your company's reputation. He stared at Wu Huiren and said word by word, I just want something for self-defense. If you can help me with this, I won't let you down. Wu Huiren didn't speak. He frowned, weighing the matter. He had the connections, of course, but he wasn't sure about Zhang Yi's background, so he naturally didn't dare to readily make introductions. Please go back first. Although I can't do this myself, I can help you inquire. If there's any news, I'll contact you. Wu Huiren was clearly undecided. However, Zhang Yi didn't push too hard. Guns were indeed something to be careful about. He smiled. All right, then I'll wait for your news. By the way, this is urgent. Please start working on my safe house as soon as possible. Wu Huiren replied. We can finish it for you within half a month at most. After finishing their discussion, Zhang Yi signed the contract on the spot and paid a down payment of 1 million yuan. As for the remaining balance, well, he would never have the chance to pay it. Leaving Zhanglong Security Company, the housing issue was basically resolved. Next, Zhang Yi returned to his car and called an acquaintance, Lu Yang, who ran a hunting ground in Tianhai City. He had leased several hundred acres in the western hills, filled with various harmless small animals for people to hunt for recreation. He had many bows, crossbows, and air guns obtained through legal channels. Zhang Yi had been there a few times before, so he had Lu Yang's contact information. He called Lu Yang and asked him to buy a batch, offering to pay a premium. Lu Yang was a businessman, and since he sometimes asked favors of Zhang Yi, he readily agreed. Brother Zhang, what are you buying so much equipment for? These things are only for hunting or personal use. You can't use them to hurt people. Lu Yang asked with a laugh, but there was a hint of caution in his voice. After all, the items were being sold from his hands. If Zhang Yi used these weapons to hurt someone, he would be in trouble too. Of course, someone who could run a hunting ground in Tianhai City naturally had a background. But there was no need for him to take risks for an ordinary friend like Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi laughed heartily. You're overthinking it. I've made plans with a few friends to go hunting in an African wildlife park soon, so I'm getting more equipment. Lu Yang clicked his tongue. Oh ho, Brother Zhang sure knows how to have fun. But there are a lot of lions and hyenas in Africa. Be careful. So it's settled then. How soon can you get the things ready for me? Hey, I have them readily available here. Come pick them up when you have time. Zhang Yi didn't delay and immediately drove to the West Mountain hunting ground to purchase the items. For him, time was precious now, and not a moment could be wasted. He bought 5 steel crossbows, 3 high-grade compound bows, and 300 bolts and arrows each from Lu Yang. In addition, he bought 2 high-quality hunting knives made of Damascus steel, incredibly tough and sharp, and unlikely to be damaged unless used for prolonged chopping of hard objects. These items filled his trunk. Looking at the pile of equipment, Zhang Yi felt a sense of security. He hauled the equipment home. Since everything was purchased through legal channels, and he had obtained a hunting license for his own recreational use, he wasn't worried about being questioned by the police. By the time he got home, it was dusk. Zhang Yi went out again and enjoyed a hot pot meal at Hadaleo by himself. Thinking that he would have to make hot pot himself in the future, he immediately paid and ordered 10,000 servings of hot pot base from Hadaleo. The Hadaleo staff were stunned, thinking Zhang Yi was from a rival business trying to cause trouble. Fortunately, Hadaleo had good service, so they didn't directly confront Zhang Yi. Later, the manager came over and, after questioning Zhang Yi, accepted the order. However, the condition was cash payment to prevent any sabotage attempts by rival businesses. Zhang Yi readily paid over 1 million yuan on the spot. Such generosity made the manager beam, and he even threw in 500 extra servings for Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi left his address and asked the Hadaleo staff to deliver the hot pot base later. As for the ingredients, he could get those directly from the Walmart warehouse. Only hot pot base wasn't something they actually sold. Even the packaged hot pot bases available on the market were far inferior to the in-store ones. Otherwise, no one would bother going to the restaurant for hot pot. After his meal, Zhang Yi was about to go home when he received a call from the five-star hotel manager. Mr. Zhang, the 500 tables of food you ordered are ready. Are you available to receive them now? Yes, just have them delivered. Zhang Yi returned home, waiting for the food and drinks to arrive. 500 tables of food would be enough for him to eat for 2 or 3 years. With 8 or 9 million yuan left, he didn't feel the slightest bit distressed about spending money, but was rather anxious to spend it all. On his way home, Zhang Yi thought about what else he liked to eat. So, he placed orders with several major restaurants in Tianhai City, asking each to deliver 100 tables of food. 8 major cuisines, including Western food, he ordered a total of several thousand tables. With this, he had taken care of his meals for half a lifetime. Soon, the catering trucks from Hongfu Tianxia Hotel arrived at the entrance of Yuelu community. 20 or 30 vehicles formed a massive procession, blocking the road and stunning the community's residents. Security guard Uncle Yu hurried forward to stop them, asking what they were doing. The hotel manager explained the situation, but Uncle Yu insisted on the owner's presence before opening the gate. After all, their presence was too imposing, and he didn't know what was in the vehicles. He couldn't easily let them in for the sake of the community's safety. The hotel manager had to call Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi went downstairs and arrived at the community entrance. At this time, the entrance was crowded with people, including neighbors from the building, and onlookers Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning. Zhang Yi walked up to Uncle Yu and smiled. Uncle Yu, these people are delivering food to me. Let them in. Uncle Yu was astonished. Delivering food? What kind of food requires dozens of vehicles to deliver? The surrounding neighbors were also in an uproar when they heard it was a catering service. Good heavens, that must be at least a few hundred tables. Could it be that something's happening at Zhang Yi's house and they're holding a banquet? Could he be getting married? But a few hundred tables is too much. Look closely, that's Hongfu Tianxia, a 5-star hotel. Ordering hundreds of tables there would cost at least 1 million. Oh my god, a single banquet can cost over 1 million. Zhang Yi is really hiding his wealth. I only knew his family was well off, but now it seems he's a tycoon. The neighbors chattered, their gazes at Zhang Yi turning fervent, with a hint of awe. Seeing this scene, Fang Yuqing by the roadside pursed her lips, strengthening her resolve to win Zhang Yi over. She proactively walked toward Zhang Yi and smiled. Zhang Yi, what are you busy with at home lately? You've bought so many things. Zhang Yi ignored her and offered Uncle Yu a cigarette. Seeing the owner had arrived, Uncle Yu opened the gate, allowing the Hongfu Tianxia Hotel convoy to enter the community. Zhang Yi led the way. Although he didn't respond to Fang Yuqing, she didn't seem to mind at all, chatting and laughing beside him. Is there something going on at home that you can't tell me? Aren't we good friends? In the future, I hope to get to know you better. Don't treat me like an outsider. Zhang Yi gave her a deep look and sneered. These things are all bought for my boss. And the last time we went to the Western restaurant, he treated me. He sighed. Oh, I wish I were really that rich. Fang Yuqing's expression changed instantly. You're not joking with me, are you? Zhang Yi shrugged. Why would I lie to you? We've known each other for several years. You know my family situation. My parents passed away. I'm just a warehouse manager. How can I have any money? His explanation made Fang Yuqing's expression fluctuate between cloudy and sunny. She had indeed suspected it. A rich second generation should at least come from a family with a big business. While Zhang Yi's parents had passed away years ago, leaving behind some assets, he wasn't considered a rich second generation. Now that Zhang Yi had personally admitted he wasn't a rich second generation, all of Fang Yuqing's doubts were explained. She silently distanced herself from Zhang Yi, then smoothed her hair and said with a polite smile, "Whether you're a rich second generation or not, we're still best friends, aren't we? I'm not a gold digger." She deliberately emphasized the word friends. Zhang Yi curled his lip and stopped talking to her. Meanwhile, the Hongfu Tianxia staff began carrying tables of food into Zhang Yi's house. Zhang Yi ordered the most luxurious dishes: abalone, sea cucumber, shark fin, fish maw, Australian lobster, truffles, caviar, everything. With 500 tables of food, his house was originally difficult to fit them all. Even the hotel manager looked a little troubled. However, Zhang Yi told them to just carry everything into the house. He secretly, while the movers were downstairs, transferred all the food into his spatial storage. He did it very covertly, so no one noticed. Soon, all 500 tables of food were stored in his spatial storage. In the evening, Zhang Yi received a call from Wu Huiran, the manager of Zhanglong Company. Wu Huiran told Zhang Yi that they were ready and could come to build the safe house for him at any time. He asked when it would be convenient for Zhang Yi to start the work. Zhang Yi told them they could come tomorrow. He planned to move to a hotel first. After discussing the safe house, Zhang Yi waited for Wu Huiran's next words. He had another very important matter to discuss with Wu Huiran, which was acquiring the Equality for All device. After hesitating for a while, Wu Huiran lowered his voice and said to Zhang Yi, "If you really have this need, I can recommend a channel for you. But the price will be a little high." Zhang Yi nodded. Of course, he understood this. But now, he didn't care about money at all. That's not a problem, as long as the quality is good. Wu Huiran said easily. "All right, in that case, I'll introduce you. I'll inform you of the transaction location in 3 days." With the gun issue settled, Zhang Yi felt a lot more at ease. In the apocalypse, having this thing, whether encountering humans or non-human things, would give him a huge advantage. The next day, Zhang Yi packed some important things from his home into his space. Since he was going to turn his house into a safe house, he needed to temporarily move into a hotel. Early in the morning, 3 black vans drove into Yuelu community. A large group of Zhanglong Company workers in work clothes got out and began to measure Zhang Yi's house. Many neighbors saw this scene, their eyes full of curiosity. Is Zhang Yi crazy? What's with all the weird stuff he's been doing lately? A few colleagues chuckled. "Yeah, I saw him buy 3 shopping carts full of food at the supermarket the other day." Huh? Anyone who didn't know better would think the end of the world is coming. Hoarding so much food, won't it all go to waste when it expires? Maybe there's something wrong with his head. Everyone expressed their confusion about Zhang Yi's unusual behavior, but no one really cared, only treating him as a joke. Even Fang Yuqing and Li Keining thought Zhang Yi had lost his mind. Li Keining suddenly realized, "I think I understand now. No wonder he went to a Michelin 3-star restaurant that day. Turns out his brain is fried." Fang Yuqing frowned, feeling particularly annoyed. Thinking about that day, she had taken the initiative to talk to Zhang Yi and helped him push so much stuff home. Her feet were sore, and now she was just filled with anger. "What the hell is Zhang Yi up to?" Li Keining said with some concern. "He promised to treat us to a big meal. He hasn't forgotten, has he?" She was really looking forward to eating at a Michelin 3-star restaurant. Fang Yuqing sneered. "Forget it. Seeing how mentally unstable he's been lately. Even if he invited me, I wouldn't go. What if someone sees us eating with him? How embarrassing." She planned to snag a rich husband in the future and couldn't ruin her reputation. Hearing Fang Yuqing say this, Li Keining, though reluctant, had no choice but to give up. As for Zhang Yi, he didn't care what the neighbors thought. In a month, they would understand who the real joke was. Zhang Yi left home and drove to the Walmart warehouse. It was Monday, time to go to work, and by the way, scout out the warehouse, making it easier to strike when the time came. The Walmart warehouse was in the economic development zone, on the outskirts of Tianhai City. Because the land price here was relatively cheap, many large group warehouses were concentrated here. Even some pharmaceutical company warehouses were located here. This would make it convenient for Zhang Yi to get some special medicines later. Arriving at the Walmart warehouse, Zhang Yi clocked in as usual. As the warehouse manager, Zhang Yi was more than familiar with this place. It could be said that he knew every warehouse, even every shelf, like the back of his hand. He used to find it particularly boring coming here. But today, seeing these huge warehouses and the tens of billions worth of supplies, his heart was filled with uncontainable excitement. Because soon, these things would be taken by him, becoming his most important living resources in the apocalypse. As Walmart South China General Warehouse, the amount of supplies here was beyond anyone's imagination. There were tens of thousands of cases of Coke alone, The entire warehouse covered several million square meters, packed with all kinds of daily necessities. Among them, in addition to food, clothing, hardware tools, and other daily necessities, there were even cars, drones, diesel generators, and barrels of gasoline. Almost anything the supermarket was allowed to sell could be found here. Zhang Yi had worked here for many years and knew exactly what was on every shelf. He was also very familiar with the work schedule and camera locations here. Although the surveillance here was very tight, familiar with its loopholes, he could paralyze the entire surveillance system within 10 minutes. Then, using the ability of his system space, he could take everything here. But for now, Zhang Yi was not in a hurry. There was still plenty of time, and he didn't want to alert anyone. After strolling around the warehouse, he left. With a pack of Huangdalu cigarettes, he went to the neighboring ruining pharmaceutical company warehouse. Because they worked in the same area on weekdays, he was relatively familiar with the staff here. After arriving, Zhang Yi found Zhou Hairan, a manager in their warehouse. They knew each other well. In the warehouses of large groups, there were bound to be people who profited from the warehouse. This Zhou Hairan's brother-in-law was the vice president of Ruining Group, so he often stole some medicine from the warehouse to sell. After finding Zhou Hairan, Zhang Yi chatted with him for a while, then indirectly stated his purpose. He hoped to get a few boxes of special medicines for treating acute illnesses. Zhou Hairan was wary at first, but later, Zhang Yi said that as long as he could get the medicine, he would pay double the market price. Hearing that Zhang Yi was willing to pay such a high price, Zhou Hairan immediately couldn't resist. In the end, the two agreed on a price of 3 million for 5 boxes of medicine. Having secured the medicine, Zhang Yi had basically prepared all the supplies he needed for the apocalypse. With less than a month until doomsday, he was certainly in no mood to continue working. So he went to the warehouse manager's office and lied that a grandfather from his hometown had passed away and he needed to go back to attend the funeral, requesting 20 days of leave. Zhang Yi usually got along well with everyone and had a good relationship with the manager, so he wasn't given a hard time and easily got his leave approved. For the next period of time, Zhang Yi planned to comfortably lie down in a 5-star hotel, then wait for the supplies he purchased to arrive one after another, and for the completion of his safe house. As he walked out of the manager's office, he happened to see Fang Yuqing, her butt sticking out, pouring coffee at the coffee machine. He had to admit, this woman did have some green tea bitch capital, with a flirtatiousness in her bones. Even pouring coffee, she didn't forget to wiggle her little butt. And sure enough, it attracted some young dogs to come and offer their yinshin. A man next to her was smiling and inviting Fang Yuqing to go to a Jay Chou concert, waving the tickets in his hand showily. This man was called Zhou Peng, and Zhang Yi had a strong impression of him, because they lived in the same community, and he was Fang Yuqing's loyal lapdog, one of the people who had harmed Zhang Yi in his past life. Zhou Peng was fawning over Fang Yuqing. However, it was clear Fang Yuqing wasn't interested in men like him. Financially, Zhou Peng was far worse off than Zhang Yi. He even rented his apartment. Despite this, Fang Yuqing smiled sweetly and said, "Thank you, Zhou Peng, but I have plans with friends that night." Such bad timing. Disappointment flashed across Zhou Peng's face. He had spent an entire month's salary on those 2 concert tickets. He had hoped to confess his feelings to Fang Yuqing during the concert, but his plans were now ruined. Seeing this, a mocking smile played on Zhang Yi's lips. He knew this simp wouldn't get anywhere, but in his disappointment, Zhou Peng noticed Zhang Yi's smile and became furious. To deflect his embarrassment, he marched over to Zhang Yi and said, "Zhang Yi, you're so inconsiderate. A grown man making a woman carry things for you. Aren't you ashamed? Yuqing's been complaining about her sore back all day since she helped you. Next time, don't trouble her." Zhang Yi glanced at Fang Yuqing. So she had been spreading the story. Fang Yuqing feigned innocence. "It's nothing really. I'm fine. It's just that I'm not used to heavy lifting, and I think I might have twisted my back a little." She rubbed her lower back and winced dramatically, wanting to appear chivalrous in front of Fang Yuqing. Zhou Peng grandly pointed at Zhang Yi. "Give Yuqing 500 yuan for medical expenses." Zhang Yi's eyes turned cold. He glared at Zhou Peng and snapped. "She offered to help. I didn't ask her. And who are you to tell me what to do?" Do you really think you're somebody? Zhang Yi's outburst stunned both Zhou Peng and Fang Yuqing. Zhou Peng was just a clerk in the warehouse, with no power or influence. He only dared to reprimand Zhang Yi because Zhang Yi was usually easygoing and avoided conflict. But seeing Zhang Yi's genuine anger, Zhou Peng cowered. Why are you yelling? I was just trying to talk to you. Zhang Yi scoffed and turned to leave. He didn't want to waste his breath on Zhou Peng. He now saw everyone as if they were already dead. In a month, 99% of these people around him would perish in the apocalyptic blizzard. Why bother talking to dead people? After Zhang Yi left, Zhou Peng hurried over to Fang Yuqing and whispered, Yuqing, I told you Zhang Yi wasn't a good guy. You should stay away from him. Fang Yuqing frowned, puzzled. Zhang Yi had been acting strangely lately. He didn't greet her anymore, and he didn't even chat with her or say good night every evening. Something's definitely up, she thought. After work, Zhang Yi drove to a five-star hotel in Tianhai City. It was the Hongfu Tianxia restaurant where he had previously made reservations. The manager, hearing of Zhang Yi's arrival, greeted him with a beaming smile and arranged a suite for him. A five-star hotel suite cost over 1,000 yuan a night, but Zhang Yi didn't mind. He had several million yuan. It would be a waste not to spend it. That evening, Fang Yuqing unexpectedly messaged Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, I passed by your house today and saw renovations going on. Zhang Yi's lips curled. Yes, you've been acting strange lately, stockpiling things and renovating your house. Is something going to happen? Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. This woman might be malicious, but she wasn't stupid. His recent strange behavior had caught her attention. But he didn't care. Other people's opinions meant nothing to him now. Nothing, he replied coldly, tossing his phone aside. On the other end, Fang Yuqing felt uneasy at Zhang Yi's indifference. For the past 2 years, he had been very attentive, always checking in on her and finding excuses to chat every night. But recently, he had changed completely, becoming distant and no longer initiating contact. This made her uncomfortable. She might not be interested in Zhang Yi, but she wouldn't tolerate him losing interest in her. It was like a fish escaping her pond. While Zhang Yi wasn't a rich second-generation heir, he was a decent middle-class prospect. If she couldn't find a rich husband, she could still settle for him. She typed another message. I feel like we haven't been in touch much lately. It makes me feel a little lonely. She waited, but no reply came. Fang Yuqing bit her lip, growing irritated. That damn Zhang Yi, is he possessed? I'm taking the initiative, and he dares to ignore me. Her roommate, Li Kaining, overheard her complaint and walked over with a grin. That Zhang Yi has been acting weird. Who knows why he's buying so much food and drink, and even ordering so many banquets from hotels. It's like he thinks there's going to be a shortage. Fang Yuqing frowned. Ning Ning, do you think something's really going to happen? Maybe Zhang Yi knows something, and that's why he's stockpiling. Li Kaining paused, then burst out laughing. Yuqing, are you crazy? If something were going to happen, the government would announce it. Just relax. People will think we're fools if we start hoarding supplies. Fang Yuqing chuckled self-deprecatingly. I guess so. Zhang Yi stayed in the five-star hotel suite for several days. He didn't go anywhere, spending his time ordering banquets from various hotels and practicing with his compound bow and crossbow. Fortunately, he had a good foundation from his hunting hobby. He now had a high accuracy rate within 15 meters, especially with a professional-grade compound bow, a modern piece of equipment that allowed an ordinary person to shoot like an ancient archer. It was effective not only against humans but also against wild boars, jackals, large dogs, and other animals. 3 days later, with Wu Huairan's help, Zhang Yi successfully acquired 2 guns and 100 rounds of ammunition. Although the price was a bit steep, Zhang Yi didn't mind at all. With these weighty items in hand, he felt more confident about his safety in the apocalypse. He also completed the medicine transaction with Zhou Huairan, obtaining 2 boxes of imported high-grade medicine. Another week passed. Wu Huairan called Zhang Yi to inform him that the safe house had been completed according to his specifications and invited him to inspect it. Zhang Yi finally left the hotel he had been staying in for a while and drove back to Yuelu residential area. Wu Huiren personally accompanied Zhang Yi to inspect the house. Back home, Zhang Yi couldn't help but be impressed. Zhanglong's security company truly deserved its reputation as a top-tier security company. The speed and quality of their safe house construction were impeccable. The entire house had been reinforced with 100 mm thick steel plates, just as Zhang Yi requested. Moreover, from the outside, it looked no different than before. Wu Huiren patiently explained everything to Zhang Yi. The ventilation system is military-grade and can filter any harmful gas, preventing gas attacks from the outside. In addition, the entire house's insulation system has been completely redone using professional-grade materials from the Arctic Research Institute. Besides the fireplace built according to your requirements, it can also insulate 99.5% of heat loss. At this point, Wu Huiren gave Zhang Yi a mysterious smile. Furthermore, to ensure your safety, we've installed a surveillance system throughout the entire building. With a total of 300 cameras, you can monitor every floor. After hearing all this, Zhang Yi was so astonished he didn't know what to say. He could only sigh that money truly talks and could buy services unimaginable to ordinary people. He went to the balcony and found it had been transformed into a huge floor-to-ceiling window. Wu Huiren explained, the window material is bulletproof and explosion-proof, even stronger than the 100 mm steel plates. It also provides good lighting and allows for necessary external observation. Zhang Yi was extremely satisfied with the safe house. Unless the intruders were a heavily armed military force, no one could forcibly break into his home. Even if the entire building collapsed, his room would probably remain intact. I'm very satisfied with the safe house you've built, Zhang Yi said to Wu Huiren with a smile. Wu Huiren also beamed. He took out the documents and asked Zhang Yi to sign them, then said, if there are no problems, please pay the remaining balance within 3 months. Zhang Yi smiled and nodded. Certainly, certainly. However, he had no intention of paying the remaining balance. The thought of getting a safe house worth nearly 10 million for just a 1 million deposit was exhilarating. Zhang Yi lay on the sofa, admiring his perfect safe house. After some thought, he realized he had overlooked a crucial element, a source of life. Zhang Yi slapped his forehead. Damn, how could I forget something as important as water? After the Ice Age arrived, although it would be freezing outside, water could be obtained by chipping ice. However, the temperature would generally be minus 60 or 70 degrees, and going outside meant potential danger. Zhang Yi absolutely couldn't tolerate such a significant flaw in his safe house. After some thought, he immediately ordered 100 large water storage tanks through a delivery platform. They could store 500 cubic meters of water at once, enough for him to use for several years. In addition, he could retrieve bottled water from the warehouse later, thus perfectly solving the water resource issue. The delivery guy was indeed efficient. A few hours later, he delivered the tanks to Zhang Yi's door. Zhang Yi went to the entrance of the residential area and asked Uncle Yu, the security guard, to let the delivery guy in. Seeing Zhang Yi buying so many strange things again, the surrounding neighbors all gossiped. Is there something wrong with that Zhang Yi? Yeah, he buys weird things every day. A few days ago, during his renovation, I saw people carrying steel plates at least 10 centimeters thick. Maybe he's lost his mind trying to build some kind of safe house like in the movies. I've seen videos of rich people overseas doing that kind of thing out of boredom. Isn't that completely cheating Yo Tan? Now he's bought so many water tanks. Does he think Tianhai City will have a water shortage? Ha ha ha. Faced with the neighbors' mocking laughter, Zhang Yi didn't bother to explain. He just sneered inwardly. When the Ice Age arrived, they would understand how foolish they were now. Zhang Yi had no interest in explaining to them, because these people would only see him as a fool and wouldn't listen to his well-intentioned advice. They might even turn around and accuse him of spreading rumors and disturbing social order, and then have him arrested. Uncle Yu, the gatekeeper, was chatting with Uncle Tang and neighbor. Uncle Yu kindly walked over and asked, Xiao Zhang, what are you buying so many water tanks for? If you need any help, just tell me, and I'll lend a hand. Looking at the kind-hearted Uncle Yu, Zhang Yi couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Uncle Yu was a retired soldier without children and had been a security guard in the residential area for more than 10 years, always diligent and responsible. In his past life, he had donated his last food to help a starving mother and daughter and starved to death himself. He was one of the few glimmers of humanity Zhang Yi had witnessed in the apocalypse. So Zhang Yi said to Uncle Yu, the temperature has been unusual this year. I have inside information that this winter will be very difficult. Just in case, you'd better stock up on food and drinks too, in case prices go up later. Uncle Yu had a good relationship with Zhang Yi on a daily basis. He knew that Zhang Yi was a kind and warm-hearted young man. In addition, older people tended to be more cautious, so when he heard Zhang Yi say this, he immediately frowned. Xiao Zhang, is this true? Is the information reliable? Zhang Yi nodded. Look, I prepared so much. You can stock up on instant noodles and bottled water. It doesn't matter if you buy too much of those. Uncle Yu immediately nodded. He lived alone and always liked to stock up on instant noodles and sausages, as they were convenient to cook. Since Zhang Yi had reminded him, he would take the time to buy more. It was just for peace of mind, and those things could be stored anyway, so it didn't matter if he bought too much. However, upon hearing this, Uncle Tang walked over and said to Zhang Yi, Xiao Zhang, you mustn't go around saying such things. Our society is stable and harmonious now. How could there be a shortage of supplies? Be careful saying such things, or you might get reported for spreading rumors. Then you'll be invited for tea. Zhang Yi rolled his eyes and didn't pay him any more attention. He had already given his warning, and whether they believed it or not was their own business. Zhang Yi had the delivery guy send 100 giant water barrels to his house. Then he turned on all the faucets and started filling the barrels. At this rate, it would take at most a week to fill all 100. Day after day passed. Zhang Yi wasn't idle for a single moment. He spent every penny he had without hesitation. He ate at the best restaurants every day and bought large quantities of food from top-tier establishments, storing it in his other dimensional space. During this time, he also went to the Tianhai City shooting range daily to practice archery and firearms, diligently honing his skills. It was unrealistic to become a martial arts expert in a month, but with a crossbow, guns, and a super secure metal shelter, he wouldn't fear any potential danger. Naturally, such actions couldn't escape everyone's notice. But everyone around him treated Zhang Yi as a joke. They thought he'd lost his mind and mocked him in private. Even Fang Yuqing deliberately distanced herself from him, unwilling to communicate. Time passed day by day. Soon, more than 20 days had gone by, and the end of the world was fast approaching. Zhang Yi had already amassed a huge stockpile of supplies, including food and drink, weapons, and heating equipment. However, these didn't provide him with enough security. He decided to target the giant Walmart warehouse. If he could secure that warehouse, he would have enough supplies to last him 10 lifetimes. So, Zhang Yi returned to the warehouse and went to work as usual. The Walmart warehouse was staffed 24/7, but at night, there were only 10 people on duty. Zhang Yi decided to use the simplest and most direct method, adding sleeping pills to their tea. Since the apocalypse was less than a week away, he wasn't afraid of being caught. Because these people were all Zhang Yi's old acquaintances, he easily succeeded. After the drugs took effect and they fell into a deep sleep, Zhang Yi went to the monitoring room and shut down all the warehouse cameras. Having done all this, he quickly went to the warehouse. Looking at the massive warehouse before him, Zhang Yi took a deep breath and began collecting the goods. With a glance from his right eye and a thought, entire shelves would appear in his other dimensional space. Zhang Yi first went to the beverage area. Hundreds of thousands of tons of mineral water, beverages, and alcohol were stored here, including many high-end wines and spirits. Zhang Yi didn't discriminate, putting everything into his warehouse. Soon, the thousands of cubic meters of beverages vanished. Next was the fuel area. There were tons of anthracite coal, bottled gasoline, and alcohol. These were all household-type fuels, used for home storage or camping trips. There were tens of thousands of boxes of anthracite alone, not to mention the solid alcohol and bottled gasoline. The quantity here was enough for Zhang Yi to use for 100 years. Zhang Yi didn't hesitate to collect them all. Then, using his years of warehousing expertise, he allocated areas for them in his other dimensional space for easy access. His third stop was the food area. The quantity here was even greater, tens of thousands of tons. Canned food, packaged roast chicken, roast duck, puff foods, instant noodles, high-end snacks. Zhang Yi wasn't picky, taking whatever he could. After taking the food, Zhang Yi went to the sports equipment area. Exercise equipment was also essential for his safe house. Although the space in the safe house was limited, he wouldn't be polite about what he could take, as the space in his other dimension was unlimited. There was no reason not to take it. Among them, there were some particularly useful items. Baseball bats and fencing foils, for example, were excellent weapons. During the collection process, Zhang Yi found some other particularly useful items. For instance, skiing and mountaineering equipment, including professional cold-weather clothing used by national athletes. These could withstand extremely cold temperatures of -50 degrees. Zhang Yi's eyes lit up. These would be top-of-the-line cold protection gear when the Ice Age arrived. He didn't hesitate, immediately collecting all the dozens of sets of top-grade cold-weather suits and sleeping bags in the warehouse. After 2 hours, Zhang Yi single-handedly emptied the entire multi-million-square-foot Walmart warehouse. Looking at the vast, empty warehouse, Zhang Yi felt an indescribable satisfaction. Now, even facing the coldest ice age, he was confident he could live comfortably. Zhang Yi returned to his workstation, drank some of the drug tea himself, and then fell asleep at his desk. He didn't know how long it was before he was abruptly shaken awake. Supervisor, something terrible has happened. Wake up. Zhang Yi slowly opened his eyes, looking at his colleagues with a confused expression. What's wrong? A warehouse employee pointed at the warehouse, trembling. It's like it's been robbed. Our warehouse has been completely emptied. What? Zhang Yi stood up, slapping the table in surprise. He pretended to go to the warehouse and, of course, saw the empty scene. Zhang Yi knew better than anyone what had happened. However, his legs went weak, and he said in a trembling voice, "What on earth happened? How could so much material in the warehouse disappear?" The surrounding employees also had nervous expressions. Yeah, the materials in this warehouse are worth at least tens of billions. Even if you used large trucks, it would take several days to haul it all away. How could it all disappear in the blink of an eye? They didn't mention the fact they had been asleep. After all, it was common for everyone to sneak a nap during the night shift. Zhang Yi paced back and forth with a serious face, feigning anxiety. Then he said to everyone, "This is too bizarre. We can't handle this. We should call and notify the higher-ups." Although everyone was nervous, they weren't overly scared. Because the matter had become so big, they wouldn't bear much responsibility. Billions worth of goods disappearing from the entire warehouse in just 2 hours was clearly not something they could have done. Earning only a few thousand yuan a month, they had no reason to risk their lives for the company. Therefore, when Zhang Yi said this, everyone nodded in agreement. Let the higher-ups worry about this mess. Zhang Yi immediately called the warehouse manager to report the incident. Upon hearing the news, the manager was dumbfounded, even thinking Zhang Yi was joking with him. Zhang Yi emptied the entire Walmart South China warehouse. Goods worth tens of billions went into his spatial dimension. He pretended to know nothing and immediately reported it to Walmart's senior management. The news quickly spread throughout Walmart's South China regional headquarters. A large group of shocked executives rushed to the scene and called the police. Zhang Yi wasn't worried about being exposed. After all, the disappearance of tens of billions worth of goods from an entire warehouse in just 2 hours was too bizarre. Even with a full police investigation, it wouldn't be solved anytime soon. However, he still feigned nervousness and fear, cooperating with the police investigation. After a night of interrogation, Zhang Yi was released. The police were also very suspicious about the incident. They investigated the surveillance footage inside and outside the warehouse. Although the internal footage had been turned off, it was impossible to steal millions of cubic meters of goods without leaving any trace. However, A review of the surrounding surveillance footage showed no sign of any vehicles passing by. In other words, the tens of billions worth of goods either vanished into thin air or it was an inside job orchestrated by Walmart itself. Logically, the latter seemed more plausible. Unless it was a supernatural phenomenon, there was no way to explain how millions of cubic meters of goods could disappear in just 2 hours. As for ordinary employees like Zhang Yi, although they aroused some suspicion, they couldn't explain the logistical problem of the disappearing goods. Even if there were internal issues, it wasn't the main contradiction. Zhang Yi was ordered not to leave Tianhai City in the short term and to cooperate with the police and Walmart's internal investigation at any time. Zhang Yi cooperated fully and was released. Back home, Zhang Yi glanced outside through the blinds of his floor-to-ceiling windows. Today was December 8th, 4 days before the Ice Age. For the remaining time, he just needed to stay home and do nothing to win at life. Thinking about the tens of billions worth of supplies in his spatial dimension, encompassing almost everything needed for life, Zhang Yi felt very secure. He went back to his bedroom and lay down. After a busy night and cooperating with the interrogation, he was a little tired. Zhang Yi slept until evening. He turned on the TV, and the news was reporting the Walmart South China warehouse theft. Due to the massive loss and the bizarre nature of the theft, major news stations across the country were reporting on it. Such a large warehouse, emptied in just a few hours, it must be an inside job. It must be insiders, most likely Walmart senior management, trying to defraud the insurance company. That's millions of cubic meters of goods. Even with large trucks, it's impossible to haul it all away in one night. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. No one would know the answer to this before the apocalypse arrived. For the next few days, Zhang Yi stayed at home, going nowhere. He knew that time was running out for this world. For safety's sake, he wouldn't leave his room. During this period, investigators from the police and Walmart headquarters called him in for questioning. Although they suspected that Zhang Yi's behavior that night was a bit unusual, due to the short investigation time and the lack of conclusive evidence, their suspicions remained just that. They couldn't arrest him. Some acquaintances sent messages inquiring about the inside story, but Zhang Yi brushed them off. Finally, December 12th arrived. The gamma rays passed by the blue planet at 2:00 a.m. It was only a fleeting moment, but the impact on the planet was devastating. A few hours earlier, Zhang Yi had completely sealed his room, and the fireplace was already lit. Because soon, with the depletion of energy, things like air conditioning and heating would completely fail. All heating methods would have to rely on the most primitive means. At 2 a.m., he sat on the sofa in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, holding a bottle of beer, staring intently outside. Suddenly, a white light appeared at the edge of the sky. Although it was midnight, the earth brightened as if it were dusk. But this light only lasted for 2 seconds before fading away. Most people were already asleep and didn't notice this momentary change. But Zhang Yi, who knew what it meant, felt a chill down his spine. He took a big gulp of beer, the refreshing Budweiser giving him a sense of calm. Zhang Yi thought, throwing a few more good logs into the fireplace. He turned on the TV, watching the programs while waiting for the world to change. Just a few minutes later, it started to snow heavily outside. At first, the snowflakes were only the size of fingernails, but in less than 2 minutes, they turned into goose feathers. The wind began to howl outside, and the snow seemed to become terrifying in an instant. The entire city was suddenly covered in heavy snow. This was the power of nature. When it changed, it wouldn't give you any warning. Zhang Yi's heart began to race. Although his safe house was perfect, he had experienced the Ice Age once, so he couldn't help but worry. He wondered if this $8 million safe house could completely withstand the coming temperature drop. However, as the flames roared in the fireplace, the indoor temperature became incredibly warm. Even hot. Zhang Yi glanced at the indoor temperature. It had reached 32.6 degrees C. Looking outside again, the overwhelming snow had already engulfed the entire city. Zhang Yi felt much more at ease, but he didn't rush to sleep. He needed to continue observing the changes. As for rest, There would be plenty of time later. In less than half an hour, a thick layer of snow had accumulated on the balcony outside. Zhang Yi opened his phone to check the news and found that the news of the sudden temperature drop had spread all over the internet. The internet was full of complaints, with netizens lamenting that the winter had come too early this year and they hadn't had time to prepare winter clothes. This damn weather. How is it already minus 10 degrees Celsius? The roads will probably be frozen tomorrow. How are we supposed to go to work? Some people were happy. It snowed so heavily. I don't have to go to work tomorrow. Ha! Especially some friends from the south were excitedly posting photos of themselves with the heavy snow. They said they had never seen such heavy snow in the south. Zhang Yi shook his head. This was just the beginning. The heavy snow would continue for the next 3 months, and the temperature would continue to drop. By then, they wouldn't be in such a good mood to appreciate the snow. The Ice Age had begun. Goose feathers snowed down on Tianhai City in the south. The internet buzzed with discussion, some complaining, others celebrating. But none of them knew that this heavy snow and plummeting temperature wasn't temporary, but would persist and intensify. Ultimately, it would bring a catastrophe no one could withstand. However, at this moment, Zhang Yi was lying comfortably on the sofa in his home, enjoying the 30-plus degree temperature of his safe house, savoring an ice-cold Budweiser. Life is good. Just then, Zhang Yi's phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and saw that people were chatting in his various mobile chat groups. There were his former classmates, hobby groups, and the neighborhood owners group. My God, why is it suddenly snowing so heavily? The weather forecast didn't say anything. I was frozen awake in the middle of the night and had to get up and turn on the air conditioner. Don't even talk about it. Our crappy air conditioner's heating isn't working well. It's been on for ages and it's getting colder and colder. I don't know how long this cold weather will last. I haven't even bought my winter clothes yet. Everyone was discussing and expressing their feelings. But Zhang Yi could sense that most people didn't take the sudden temperature drop seriously. Some were even delighted. Zhang Yi knew very well that this was only temporary. He yawned, not wanting to continue reading. Returning to his warm bed, Zhang Yi pulled up the goose-down duvet and closed his eyes comfortably. His bed was very comfortable, a high-end piece he'd taken from the Walmart warehouse. The mattress, in particular, was said to be the same model used by a certain female celebrity, worth $3 million. Outside, heavy snow fell and the wind howled, but inside, the fireplace roared, maintaining a pleasant temperature. In such a comfortable environment, Zhang Yi quickly drifted off to sleep. Early the next morning, Zhang Yi was awakened by his ringing phone. He opened his eyes and saw it was a call from Bai Lianhua, Fang Yuqing. His pleasant dreams disturbed, Zhang Yi was naturally in a bad mood. He picked up the phone and asked grumpily, "Hello, what do you want so early in the morning?" Fang Yuqing was taken aback by Zhang Yi's icy tone. However, she quickly said, "Zhang Yi, it's so cold outside today. You stocked up on supplies before. Did you know in advance that the temperature would drop so drastically?" Fang Yuqing's voice trembled slightly, as if she was trying to endure something. Hearing this, a mocking smile curled Zhang Yi's lips. Sure enough, this white lotus never called without an ulterior motive. He said lazily, "I just heard a friend mention it casually, but I didn't expect the temperature to drop so much." He lifted the duvet. The room was so warm that he was starting to sweat. Zhang Yi put on his slippers and walked to the French windows. The familiar scene outside made his eyes narrow. The heavy snow had already engulfed the entire city. He could no longer see the streets or the shrubs by the roadside. He could only vaguely make out the outlines of the city buildings, with many first floors already submerged. And the snow continued to fall, the goose feather-like snowflakes falling ceaselessly to the ground, showing no sign of stopping. On the other end of the phone, Fang Yuqing continued, "No wonder you stocked up on so many things. Zhang Yi really didn't even tell me about this in advance." Zhang Yi frowned, surprised that she had the nerve to complain to him. He hung up directly and tossed the phone aside. Then he went to the bathroom and took a comfortable hot shower. Afterwards, he took out a top-grade A5 Wagyu beef from his space and had steak with spaghetti for breakfast. While eating breakfast, he turned on the TV. Since the temperature drop had just begun, there was no power outage yet, so the TV still worked. But even if the power went out, Zhang Yi had prepared various backup power sources, as well as dozens of generators and a massive amount of gasoline. In terms of energy, he had enough for at least 300 years. After turning on the TV, Zhang Yi first switched to the morning news channel. Although, as a reborn person, he knew what was happening outside, watching the situation unfold was a form of entertainment at times like this. On the news channel, both anchors were wearing thick down jackets. One had to know that in places like television stations, central air conditioning was never stingy and was a priority for power supply. But the fact that the anchors needed to wear down jackets meant the temperature had reached a point where even central air conditioning couldn't fully combat it. The female anchor faced the camera and said in a steady voice, "Last night, a strong cold wave hit all parts of the world, causing drastic changes in global temperatures. The general temperature drop has reached 70 to 100 degrees Celsius. The meteorological department is investigating the cause of this cold wave. In the next few days, please pay attention to keeping warm and avoid frostbite. If it's not necessary, try not to go out. The authorities will properly resolve this issue. Please do not panic. Do not spread or believe rumors, and do not hoard supplies. The snowstorm will soon pass." Hearing the female anchor's words, Zhang Yi scoffed. After the arrival of the Ice Age, survival depended on oneself. If one foolishly stayed at home and did nothing, they would definitely be among the first to die. The upper right corner of the TV already displayed Tianhai City's outdoor temperature as minus 65 degrees Celsius. Just yesterday, the highest temperature in Tianhai City was 15 degrees Celsius, meaning a sudden drop of 80 degrees Celsius. Zhang Yi shrugged. This degree of temperature drop was exactly the same as in his previous life. However, now he was wearing pajamas, drinking red wine, and eating steak with spaghetti, completely oblivious to the cold outside. After all, it was a safe house built for 8 million, and he had specifically emphasized its insulation function, so the indoor temperature hardly escaped. At this moment, Zhang Yi's phone rang again. He was intrigued and wanted to see what his neighbors, who had previously mocked him, were talking about. The first message he saw was from Fang Yuqing. "Zhang Yi, why did you suddenly hang up on me? It's snowing so heavily outside, and I can't go out. Didn't you buy a lot of food? Can you lend me some? I'll return it to you after the snowstorm passes." Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow, a sneer playing on his lips. The White Lotus was clever, knowing that with such heavy snow, food would become very expensive. She didn't want to risk going out in the sub-zero temperatures of minus 60 or minus 70 degrees, so she wanted to ask Zhang Yi for food. But Zhang Yi knew that this Ice Age disaster would last a very long time and wouldn't pass quickly. Moreover, he wasn't going to give Fang Yuqing a single bite. In his past life, he had been fooled by this White Lotus and had given her a lot of his food. In the end, she had actually caused his death and even wanted to dig out his ribs to make soup. Now, Zhang Yi only wanted to toy with her and watch her miserable demise. With this thought, a playful smile spread across his lips as he sent a message to Fang Yuqing. "You should have said so earlier. I've almost finished all the food I've stocked up. Look, I just pan-fried some steak this morning." After sending the message, Zhang Yi took a selfie with himself and the steak and red wine on the table. He deliberately included his pajama-clad self in the picture before sending it to Fang Yuqing. At this moment, Fang Yuqing was huddled in her rented apartment, tightly wrapped in 2 quilts. Although the air conditioner was set to 40 degrees, the indoor temperature hadn't even reached 0 degree. She shivered all over, feeling as if icy drafts were constantly seeping into her blankets. After seeing the photos Zhang Yi sent, Fang Yuqing's eyes widened in disbelief. She couldn't believe that in such frigid weather, Zhang Yi was wearing thin pajamas, comfortably eating steak, and drinking Red Bull. They lived in the same building. Why did it feel like they were living in 2 different worlds? Especially after seeing the delicious steak and the bottle of high-end red wine on the table, Fang Yuqing's mouth watered. As a top-tier White Lotus and gold digger, she was quite knowledgeable about luxury goods. Based on her knowledge, the steak Zhang Yi was eating was authentic top-grade Wagyu. And the French wine by his hand was definitely a vintage, worth at least 20 or 30,000 per bottle. The contrast between her freezing state and Zhang Yi's comfortable life filled Fang Yuqing with intense jealousy. She immediately messaged him, "So nice. I want to eat steak and drink red wine too." She felt her hint was obvious enough. Based on Zhang Yi's past behavior, he would definitely offer to bring her steak and wine. But after seeing her message, Zhang Yi just laughed. Did she still think he was her lapdog? He slowly replied, "If you want to eat, go buy some from the supermarket." Fang Yuqing's face stiffened. Wasn't that obvious? It was minus 60 or 70 degrees outside, and any exposed skin risked frostbite. How could he make such an unreasonable request of such a delicate girl like her? Gritting her teeth, she angrily said, "Zhang Yi, you're not a man. You don't even know how to take advantage of such a good opportunity to show off." At this point, Fang Yuqing still had some pride. Although she craved the steak and the fine wine, in her eyes, Zhang Yi was just another fish in her pond. Besides, she believed this snowstorm would pass in a few days. So, she still tried to maintain her haughty goddess image, refusing to directly ask Zhang Yi for food. Zhang Yi ignored her and checked other chat groups, looking for some entertainment. He saw the neighborhood committee's Aunt Lin urging everyone in their building's group chat to stay calm and remain indoors. "Don't panic, everyone. It's just a sudden drop in temperature. It'll be over in 2 or 3 days at most. Don't rush to hoard supplies. Trust our government. Our neighborhood committee will also help everyone get through this snowstorm. Please obey orders and don't cause trouble for the authorities." Some residents voiced their concerns. With such heavy snow, who knows when it will stop? It's already difficult to go out. How can we manage without stocking up on some supplies? Exactly. We should go out and buy some groceries. I'm afraid the prices will skyrocket in the next few days. Aunt Lin immediately sharpened her tone. "What are you doing? Aren't you just creating chaos? Hoarding supplies will only drive up prices, and then everyone will have to pay exorbitant prices for groceries. If I catch anyone hoarding supplies, don't blame me for reporting them for disturbing public order." Seeing Aunt Lin ordering everyone around like a leader, a sneer appeared on Zhang Yi's lips. This was the first day of the Ice Age. Because of the extreme cold, the supermarkets hadn't been completely emptied yet. Venturing out in the heavy snow, despite the risk of frostbite, would definitely offer a chance to stockpile some supplies. But because of Aunt Lin's intimidation, many people held on to a Zhaoxing Xinli, fluke mentality/false hope, and didn't go out to buy groceries. The consequences were predictable. Just then, Aunt Lin's attention suddenly shifted to Zhang Yi. She tagged him in the group chat. "Xiao Zhang, you've already hoarded a lot of things at home. Now that the snowstorm is severe, you can't be a negative example. Stay home these next few days. If I catch you going out to buy things again, don't blame me for being unkind." Zhang Yi's expression darkened. This old woman still held a grudge because he hadn't given her anything when she'd begged him before. Now that she had the opportunity, she wouldn't forget to take a jab at him. Unfortunately for her, the neighborhood committee meant nothing to Zhang Yi now. He coldly replied, "Aunt Lin, no one knows how long this snowstorm will last. What if it lasts a long time and everyone runs out of food? Can you take responsibility for that?" Zhang Yi's question resonated with many people. They were all dissatisfied with Aunt Lin's words, but were hesitant to contradict her due to her position in the neighborhood committee. With Zhang Yi taking the lead, others spoke up. "Yeah, you're not letting us stockpile supplies. Who's to blame when we run out of food and drink? Can you bear that responsibility?" Aunt Lin panicked as everyone started to argue with her. She hated Zhang Yi even more. He dared to contradict her publicly in the group chat. Wasn't that a slap in the face? Don't worry. The neighborhood committee can assure you that there will be no shortage of supplies. The snowstorm will also pass quickly. And you, Zhang Yi, don't incite panic at a time like this. That's illegal. Huddled at home, Aunt Lin gritted her teeth and viciously muttered, "That Zhang Yi is so arrogant. I'll find a way to get him detained for a few days." Zhang Yi laughed. Even at this point, the old woman, surnamed Lin, still wanted to wield her little bit of power. It was truly ridiculous. "Oh dear, I can't bear such a heavy accusation. Don't worry, it's so cold outside. I wouldn't go out even if you asked me to. Suit yourselves. He had already stocked up on supplies, so there was no need for him to go out and fight for groceries with others at the supermarket. However, those who believed Aunt Lynn's lies would be miserable later. Zhang Yi sighed inwardly. With the arrival of the apocalypse, he didn't know how many people would freeze or starve to death. But some deserved it, like those neighbors who had harmed him in his past life. Whether they lived or died, Zhang Yi was determined to survive. What did the lives of others have to do with him? Zhang Yi sat on the sofa, yawning out of boredom. While others were struggling with hunger and cold, he was living more comfortably than in paradise. His home had the perfect insulation system and an inexhaustible supply of fuel, enough to keep his safe house at a constant, comfortable temperature year-round. He didn't need to do anything, just enjoy each day to the fullest. There weren't any good shows on TV at the moment. All the live streams have been shut down due to the extreme cold. After all, even his favorite beautiful streamers couldn't endure temperatures of -60 or 70, or even over 100 degrees below zero, while wearing camisoles and dancing. If they could, Zhang Yi would give them a thumbs up and praise them as truly hardcore. He opened his spatial storage. The electronics section contained numerous game consoles and AAA titles. Several hundred brand new, unopened PS5s, Switches, and Xboxes were stored there. As for game cartridges, he had tens of thousands. Zhang Yi took out a brand new PS5, hooked it up to the massive 100-inch Sony TV in his living room, and started playing. He was playing the latest AAA action game of the year, Bayonetta 3. He also had Elden Ring, The Witcher 3, and Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice on hand. If he wanted to kill time, they were all excellent choices. If he thought those games were too short, there were also incredibly time-consuming games like Civilization and Cities, Skylines that he could play to his heart's content. No longer needing to worry about work or social obligations. This life was even better than before the apocalypse. Since he was at home, Zhang Yi was just wearing pajamas, snacking and playing games, having a great time. After a while, his phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was the annoying neighborhood committee busybody, Aunt Lynn, tagging him in the group chat. Zhang Yi, the roads outside are blocked by heavy snow. Bring your tools and come out to help shovel snow. Her tone was commanding. Zhang Yi also saw that she was calling on everyone in the group to go out and shovel snow, but very few people responded. Unexpectedly, she had come directly to him. Zhang Yi glanced at the heavy snow outside. The entire first floor was almost completely buried. 3 meters of snow was practically impossible to clear by hand. Besides, Zhang Yi knew that this snow would last for at least another 3 months. Going out to shovel now would be pointless. It would fall faster than they could clear it. Zhang Yi immediately refused. It's so cold outside that we'll freeze into popsicles in minutes. Even if we shovel snow, we should wait until it stops. Others echoed Zhang Yi. Yeah, it's over 70 degrees below zero outside. We'll probably get frostbite if we go out for even a little while. We're not in the Northeast. We don't have any proper cold weather gear. How can we go out? Aunt Lynn became anxious. What kind of attitude is this? Shoveling snow isn't for me, it's for everyone. You're all young and strong. When disaster strikes, you should take the initiative to serve the people, not try to avoid it. She pointed her finger at Zhang Yi, the leader of the opposition. Zhang Yi, I order you, in the name of the neighborhood committee, to go out and shovel snow. This is a time of crisis. We must unite and obey the organization's commands. Anyone who dares to oppose me is opposing the leadership of the neighborhood committee. After the snow disaster is over, you will be held accountable by the organization. Aunt Lynn once again invoked her status as a member of the neighborhood committee. The residents dared to be angry, but dared not speak. The snow disaster had just begun, and the social order still existed, so no one dared to disobey. Although these neighborhood committee members seemed to have little power, because of the small amount of power they held, which was closely related to everyone's daily lives, people generally didn't dare to provoke them. Everyone remained silent, unwilling to be the first to speak out. However, many hoped that Zhang Yi would stand up and firmly rebuke Aunt Lynn, letting him be the one to speak for everyone. Zhang Yi, of course, knew the thoughts of these ostriches. A sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he felt immense contempt for them. But it was impossible for him to swallow his anger. So he decided to directly confront Aunt Lin. He looked through the chat history above. The few people Aunt Lin had tagged were all young people in the community who were usually easy to talk to. She had completely ignored those troublesome troublemakers or those with power and influence. So Zhang Yi directly mocked. Aunt Lin is right. Since it's for everyone, the neighborhood committee members should take the lead in shoveling snow. And speaking of young and strong, there are so many people in our community. Why did you only call on us few? Do you think we are easy to bully? I don't see you tagging those gangsters and rich kids. What? When you encounter them, you become speechless. Seeing Zhang Yi say this, the other residents nodded in agreement. Zhang Yi is truly my internet mouthpiece. That's right, she only finds honest people. Why doesn't she go find Chen Jinghao and Su Hao? Everyone knew who Zhang Yi was talking about. Living in the same community, everyone was well aware of the influential figures. For example, Chen Jinghao, who lived in 601 on the 6th floor, was a well-known local gangster involved in earthworks projects, with hundreds of men under his command. And Su Hao, who lived in 802 on the 8th floor, whose father was a famous real estate developer in Tianai City, and whose family also had members working in the government. Aunt Lin hadn't mentioned either of them from beginning to end. Zhang Yi directly exposed Aunt Lin's bullying nature, which made her lose face. She hadn't mentioned those troublesome figures precisely because she didn't have the guts, and they wouldn't pay any attention to her anyway. People like her always bullied the weak and feared the strong. If Zhang Yi had always been this way, Aunt Lin wouldn't be asking him to shovel snow. Feeling that she had lost face, she angrily sent several long voice messages in the group chat. Shoveling snow is a public service for everyone's benefit. Some people are so nitpicky about such small matters, without any spirit of dedication. Such people are simply the black sheep of our residents group. If you don't want to do it, then don't. There are plenty of people who will. Everyone's awareness is much higher than yours. Also, I'm not giving special treatment to certain people. It's just that there's no need to tag everyone individually. I hope you understand and don't misunderstand. If you continue to publish these slanderous remarks about me, I will call the police. Aunt Lin's explanation seemed to make things worse, especially the last part. Threatening to call the police made Zhang Yi burst into laughter. Hearing Aunt Lin's words, some of the more timid residents became afraid and took their tools to shovel snow. But at this moment, Zhang Yi was not afraid of her at all. Not to mention that the police wouldn't support her unreasonable behavior. Besides, did she still think that all social institutions were functioning normally? Zhang Yi completely disregarded Auntie Lin's words. However, with nothing better to do, he decided to tease the old woman. Yo, Auntie Lin's looking puffy. If you're so capable, why don't you tell Chen Jinghao and Su how to come down and shovel snow? He called them out by name in the group chat, showing no regard for anyone's face. Chen Jinghao, nicknamed Hao Gu, was a notorious gangster. He was the one who led the break-in at Zhang Yi's home, wielding a pickaxe. Su Hao, an arrogant rich kid, was the first to attack Zhang Yi with a knife. In short, aside from a very few good people, all these neighbors had participated in attacking or robbing Zhang Yi. He could even guess that after his death in his previous life, every one of them had profited from his demise. So Zhang Yi gave face to no one, ruthlessly exposing their hypocrisy and disgusting them. Auntie Lin's face changed as she read the messages. Zhang Yi's direct call-out put her in a difficult position. If she backed down now, she would undoubtedly become everyone's laughingstock, and they would no longer listen to her. Left with no choice, she tagged Chen Jinghao and Su Hao in the group chat. Neighbors, the community is our home, and snow removal relies on everyone. I hope those who have time can bring their tools and come out to shovel snow together. After a while, the user with the ID 25 hashtag 602 Chen Jinghao sent a few question marks. Then, a voice message appeared in the group. Shovel snow? Shovel my ass. Are you blind? Can't you see it's still snowing heavily outside? F***CK? Are you crazy? If you're sick, go to the hospital. Don't bark here. Tag me again, and I'll kill you. Believe it or not. Chun Jinghao cursed Annie Lin, who had tagged him, with extremely vulgar language. The other residents in the group chat were amused and laughed heartily. Annie Lin thought highly of herself, but they clearly didn't take her seriously. A small neighborhood committee member only had influence over ordinary residents. These kinds of influential people wouldn't give her a second thought. The rich kid Su Hao also sent a voice message. What does your snow removal have to do with me? I don't have to work. I can sleep all day at home. After that, he sent a picture of himself lying in a thick duvet, cuddling a woman. This apartment was just a place for Su Hao to keep his mistress. He happened to be stuck there during the snowstorm. He thought Annie Lin was crazy for asking him to shovel snow. Annie Lin didn't dare talk back to Chun Jinghao. She wouldn't dare provoke a truly ruthless person. But seeing Su Hao's defiance, she retorted, "No matter what, you're still a member of the community. Snow removal is your duty." Su Hao scoffed. Do I pay the property management fees every month for nothing? Without my money, you neighborhood committee people would starve to death. F***CK. You guys live off the owner's money and act like you're in charge. Hilarious. These rich kids were not simple. Although Su Hao was idle, he had seen the world and wouldn't take a small neighborhood committee lady seriously. He continued his arrogant taunt. I have what I have today because of my parents' and family's power. Can you poor losers say the same? Hurry up and shovel snow. You still have to go out and earn your keep. After you're done shoveling, I can finally leave this hellhole. Everyone was furious at Su Hao's arrogant words, but they were powerless to refute him. Who could argue with good fortune? Although his words were harsh, they were also true. Chun Jinghao and Su Hao's actions thoroughly disheartened everyone. Annie Lin's words became meaningless, and no one paid her any attention. Annie Lin was furious. However, she wasn't angry at Chun Jinghao and Su Hao, but at Zhang Yi. She felt she had successfully mobilized the residents, but Zhang Yi, the troublemaker, had ruined everything. So she privately messaged Zhang Yi, angrily asking, Zhang Yi, are you deliberately trying to make things difficult for me? Tell me, what are you trying to do? If I ask everyone to go out and shovel snow, doesn't that mean everyone needs to go out? Now look, no one's doing it. Are we going to be stuck at home forever? Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. Oh, another one coming to get scolded? Cut the crap. You're a coward who bullies the weak and fears the strong. So what are you barking about? You didn't dare fart after being scolded by them, and now you're coming to me to find a sense of existence? Let me tell you, your grandpa isn't easy to bully. Bark at me again, and I'll kill you. Sure enough, Zhang Yi's harsh words frightened Annie Lin. She was an old woman living with her grandson, relying on her position in the neighborhood committee for respect. But if someone disregarded her position and fought back, she wouldn't stand a chance. She immediately fell silent, seemingly afraid of truly angering Zhang Yi. Annie Lin quickly blocked Zhang Yi, fearing further insults. Her body trembled, unsure if it was from the cold or Zhang Yi's threats. That bastard. He's a total jerk, a lunatic. I better not provoke him now. Just wait. I'll find ways to make your life miserable later. Annie Lin imagined using her position in the neighborhood committee to make things difficult for Zhang Yi. For example, deliberately delaying his supplies or withholding information about community activities. She envisioned Zhang Yi regretting his actions and begging her for forgiveness, while she coldly shut the door on him, saying, "Weren't you so arrogant? Be arrogant now." Annie Lin smiled smugly, lost in her fantasy. Haha, the day will come when you'll beg me. I won't stoop to your level now. Auntie Lin found satisfaction in this self-deception. Then, she returned to the group chat to try and mobilize others to shovel snow. Although everyone despised Annie Lin, most people still had to go to work. Considering their own commute, some honest people braved the minus 70°C temperatures and went out to shovel snow with their tools. Zhang Yi didn't expect that after just driving away Annie Lin, another person would come looking for trouble. This time his WeChat phone rang. He glanced at the profile picture. It was Chun Jinghao from the group chat. It seemed Zhang Yi's mention of him in the group had offended him, prompting this intimidating call. Zhang Yi already held a grudge against this thug. Seeing his call, his eyes narrowed. He was hoping this fool would come looking for trouble. After all, Zhang Yi wouldn't leave his safe house. But if anyone dared to come looking for trouble, he had plenty of ways to make them suffer a terrible death. So, Zhang Yi answered the call. The phone connected, and a torrent of vicious curses poured out. "Are you King looking to die? Who told you to talk about me in the group chat? You dare provoke me, Chen Jinghao? Looks like you little T doesn't want to live anymore. I have 100 ways to make you disappear from this city, believe it or not." Chen Jinghao was a notorious bully in Tianhai City, with hundreds of men under his command. Rumor had it he had a few lives on his hands. Therefore, all the residents in his residential complex avoided him. No one dared to provoke him. To establish his dominance, Chen Jinghao operated on the principle that anyone who offended him, even slightly, would pay a heavy price. This was his so-called face as a gangster. So, even though Zhang Yi had only mentioned him once in the residents' group chat, Chen Jinghao still considered it a provocation. On the other end of the phone, he cursed fiercely. "You really are looking to die. You're pretty good at flapping your gums. Got the guts to talk about me." Zhang Yi wasn't about to put up with him. He sneered and cursed back. "What the CK are you? Stop acting tough with me, you social scum." Useless. He'd been holding a grudge against this murderer, who in his past life had led the charge into his home and killed him. On the other end of the phone, Chen Jinghao hadn't expected Zhang Yi to talk back. He became furious, his curses even more vicious. "Zhang Yi said directly, you're a useless piece of trash. All talk and no action, right? Trying to scare who? Go eat T." After cursing him out, Zhang Yi hung up the phone and blocked the number. Thinking about Chen Jinghao's rage on the other end, Zhang Yi felt incredibly pleased. He walked to the TV and turned on the surveillance cameras. When Zhanlong Security had built his safe house, they'd installed cameras throughout the entire floor. It could be said that the entire building was under his surveillance. Zhang Yi looked towards the 6th floor, where Chen Jinghao lived. Sure enough, their door was soon flung open. Chen Jinghao, wearing a down jacket and carrying a baseball bat, stormed out, only to immediately flinch from the cold. It was minus 70 degrees Celsius outside, and to show off, he was only wearing a down jacket over a long-sleeve shirt. He'd even deliberately left the zipper open to reveal the tattoo on his chest. The freezing temperature immediately taught him a lesson. Seeing no one around, Chen Jinghao quickly rubbed his hands and hurried into the elevator. Zhang Yi sat on the sofa and calmly picked up a crossbow from under the coffee table. This crossbow was designed for hunting. Even a 300-kilogram wild boar, if hit, would have the 20-centimeter bolt pierce straight through its flesh. He hummed a tune as he loaded a bolt. After practicing for a while, he had become very proficient with the crossbow. Within 15 meters, while not 100% accurate, he wouldn't miss a target the size of a watermelon. The elevator steadily ascended. Zhang Yi, crossbow loaded, went to the door. His massive security door had a firing port 2 meters up. Zhang Yi stepped onto a chair and opened the port, which could only be opened from the inside. Then he aimed the crossbow at the corridor outside. As a precaution, Zhang Yi also had a pistol in his pocket. Even if Chen Jinghao were made of iron, he'd be in trouble today. Soon, the elevator dinged, and Chen Jinghao walked out cursing. Through the notes in the residents' group chat, he easily found Zhang Yi's apartment. Arriving at the door, he brandished the baseball bat and started banging on the door while cursing. "Zhang, you little bastard, come out here! CK, weren't you pretty tough just now? Come out now and see how I'll kill you." Chen Jinghao cursed viciously and slammed the door with all his might. But the security door was 20 centimeters thick, reinforced with bulletproof metal, making it more resistant than some armored vehicles. Naturally, Chen Jinghao couldn't break it with a baseball bat. Instead, the vibrations hurt his hand. Chen Jinghao continued cursing, unaware that he was being targeted by a crossbow. Looking at Chen Jinghao's ferocious expression, a playful smile appeared on Zhang Yi's lips. He aimed the crossbow at Chen Jinghao's head. But after thinking for a moment, he changed his target. In this apocalypse, Everyone in the building except him would likely die. Chen Jinghao would be no exception. Killing him now would be too easy. After all, in his past life, he had been brutally dismembered and eaten alive by these insane neighbors. A wicked smile spread across Zhang Yi's face. He wouldn't let this scum die so easily. So, Zhang Yi adjusted his aim. A faint whooshing sound pierced the air, and the sharp bolt struck Chen Jinghao's leg. The crossbow bolt, capable of killing wild boars, went straight through his calf. Chen Jinghao screamed in agony and collapsed to the floor, clutching his leg and wailing. In the minus 70 degrees Celsius temperatures, with a wound like that, Chen Jinghao's leg was definitely ruined. And without medication, infection was inevitable. He would die a miserable death from pain and cold. Chen Jinghao was in excruciating pain. He realized he had encountered a terrifyingly ruthless individual. These thugs relied on their fearlessness and recklessness, gambling that ordinary people wouldn't dare to resist them. But when faced with someone who dared to use a crossbow, they were also afraid. Chen Jinghao was terrified. He hadn't even seen where the bolt had come from. However, true to his gangster nature, he dragged his injured leg back to the elevator. Zhang Yi chose not to pursue him. The reason was simple. He wanted Chen Jinghao to live a little longer. After all, he wasn't a demon. Back in the elevator, Chen Jinghao dripped with cold sweat, which quickly froze in the minus 70 degrees Celsius temperature. But at this moment, his heart was colder than the air. The ruthless attack had filled him with a chilling sense of murderous intent. In this kind of society, anyone who dared to shoot someone with a crossbow was not to be trifled with. Chen Jinghao looked at his mangled leg. The bolt had completely pierced his calf. Blood stained half of his pants leg and then froze. In the extreme cold, the pain wasn't as intense. But this didn't make Chen Jinghao feel any better. On the contrary, it terrified him. He knew that if his leg didn't receive treatment, it would be useless within half an hour. Chen Jinghao finally felt fear. He took out his phone and called emergency services, but the line was constantly busy. After over 2 minutes of trying, he felt his heart sink. Outside, it was freezing, and even the hospitals were shut down. Even if a hospital was still operating, the heavy snow and city lockdown made it impossible for an ambulance to get through. Chen was a ruthless man. After hesitating for a long time, he decided to operate on himself. He had to get the crossbow bolt out at least. Back in his apartment, he retrieved a knife, an alcohol lamp, gauze, and clotting medication from a drawer. Used to fighting, he always kept these things on hand. He cut open his pants leg with a knife and paled at the sight of the wound. The extreme cold had frozen the wound, temporarily stopping the bleeding, but the surrounding area was already turning purple and blue, and his lower leg was completely numb. Despair filled Chen. He knew he had to rely on himself. Thankfully, his ruthless nature kicked in. After a moment of thought, he began the surgery. Because his lower leg was frozen, the cold numbed the pain somewhat, allowing him to complete the operation without anesthetic. However, the process was so agonizing that he nearly passed out. The leg was ruined. Lying on the sofa, gasping for air, Chen felt a burning hatred for Zhang Yi, the man who shot him. "Zhang Yi, you little bastard. I'll kill you. I swear." His eyes were filled with murderous intent. He wasn't joking. He truly intended to kill Zhang Yi. Otherwise, how could he maintain his reputation in Tianhai City? Blocked by Zhang Yi, Chen resorted to tagging him in the building's resident group chat. "Zhang Yi, you son of a bitch. Just you wait. If I don't kill you, I'll write my name backwards." The other residents didn't know what had happened, but learning that Zhang Yi had offended Chen Jinghao, they couldn't help but worry for him. Chen was a notorious thug, known for his ruthlessness. If they knew Zhang Yi had shot him with a crossbow and crippled his leg, they would be terrified. Some, however, were thrilled. Mrs. Lin, previously humiliated by Zhang Yi, gloated. "Let them fight it out. Neither of them are any good. I hope that thug Chen Jinghao beat Zhang Yi to death. That bastard who dared to insult me." Fang Yuqing, the White Lotus, also saw the message. She sneered, hoping Zhang Yi would get a good beating. How dare he be so cold to her? refusing to even share his food with a goddess like herself. No one else in the group dared to speak, afraid of getting involved. Zhang Yi saw the message and laughed. As long as he stayed in his safe house, he wasn't afraid of 100 Chen Jinghaos. He sent a voice message. "You're nothing but a barking dog. Mess with me again, and I'll cripple your other leg." The residents in the group were stunned. They couldn't believe Zhang Yi dared to provoke Chen Jinghao, and it seemed he had already injured one of Chen's legs. Chen Jinghao gripped his phone so tightly he almost crushed it. "Zhang Yi, you fucking wait. I'll kill you," Zhang Yi retorted. "Come and get me, you piece of shit. Let's see who dies first." The apocalypse had liberated Zhang Yi. Free from social norms and morality, he no longer needed to be polite to anyone. It felt good. Meanwhile, Chen was furious. Back in his apartment, the weak warmth from the air conditioner gradually brought feeling back to his leg. But the intense pain made him grimace. He now needed a crutch to move. After some thought, Chen decided killing Zhang Yi wouldn't be difficult. He had been caught off guard by the crossbow bolt. Now that he was prepared, he could call his men, break into Zhang Yi's apartment, and beat him to death. With the city in lockdown, the police and hospitals were paralyzed. It was the perfect time to kill someone. Chen immediately called his men, ordering them to bring weapons and help him eliminate Zhang Yi. Many of his men lived nearby. Upon receiving the order, they grabbed machetes, baseball bats, and steel pipes and headed to Chen's apartment. Seeing Chen's injury, they clamorously vowed to avenge him. Chen said coldly, "I'll be fine. I'll just go to the hospital when the snow melts." But that bastard dared to shoot me. That's crossing the line. If I don't kill him, how can I maintain my reputation? One of his men immediately said, "Boss, just tell me his apartment number. I'll go chop him up right now." Chen nodded. "He lives in 2401 in this building. But that little bastard is sneaky. He has a crossbow. That's how he ambushed me." A thug holding a steel pipe yelled, "That's so unfair." "A sneak attack." Chen said, "Be careful. I know he's alone. As long as you avoid his crossbow bolts, break down the door, and kill him." Chen's men were thugs. Though they knew Zhang Yi was armed, they weren't afraid. They were excited. With the city locked down, there was no law. They could attack with impunity. The malice in their hearts was unleashed without restraint. They grabbed their weapons and headed to Zhang Yi's apartment, ready to break in. Zhang Yi knew Chen Jinghao wouldn't let this go. He expected retaliation, but he wasn't nervous. He played video games, using a split screen to monitor the building's activity. He saw Chen's thugs coming. His table was covered with equipment, ready for their arrival. He had no sympathy for those thugs. They deserved what was coming. Soon, Chen's dozen or so men arrived at Zhang Yi's door. Wary of the crossbow, they used wooden boards as shields. Once they reached the door, they began their assault. "Open up, you motherfucker. You dare to shoot our boss? We're gonna kill you. Today's your last day. Open up." They cursed and pounded on Zhang Yi's door with hammers and steel pipes, intending to break in, beat him senseless, and deliver him to Chen. Zhang Yi continued playing, unfazed. He was stuck on the first boss, having died several times, and was in a bad mood. Hearing the shouting and banging, he yelled impatiently, "Can't you hit harder? Are you starving or something?" The thugs, enraged by his arrogance, hit even harder. However, the 20-centimeter thick alloy security door resisted their primitive assault. After a long struggle, only a few small white marks and chipped paint appeared on the metal door. Not even a dent. The thugs stared in disbelief. "Holy shit, this door is solid metal, and so thick. How are we supposed to break this? Damn, how many enemies does this guy have?" They were stumped. However, they had promised Chen Jinghao they would bring Zhang Yi back half dead. Unable to break the door, they continued banging and cursing outside. Zhang Yi's game character died again. Annoyed by the noise, he went to the kitchen, attached a hose to the faucet, and climbed to the firing port. The thugs outside, still yelling, didn't notice anything above them. Zhang Yi sneered and turned on the faucet, spraying them with water. The powerful stream gushed out like a rainstorm in the narrow corridor, instantly soaking them. Can you imagine what it feels like to be doused with cold water at -70 degrees? Zhang He held a large water hose and sprayed it towards the punks outside the door. There was a 70-degree temperature difference between indoors and outdoors. So the water was still steaming when it flowed out, but after landing on those people, it quickly froze. In the freezing cold, they were all wearing down jackets and sweaters. The cold water soaked them through, instantly making them feel like they had been thrown into an ice cellar. Holy shit, so cold. I'm freezing to death. Stop spraying, stop spraying. At this time, they would rather be beaten up than endure this freezing torture. One by one, their lips turned purple from the cold, and some even fainted on the spot due to hypothermia. Instinctively, they quickly ran away from Zhang Yi's door. But just 10 seconds was enough to soak them to the bone. Before they could even get to the elevator to escape, their clothes were already frozen stiff. Seeing them run away, Zhang Yi turned off the faucet. He had originally planned to teach these people a lesson with his crossbow, but reloading it was too slow, and they might be able to counterattack through the peephole. This method of flooding them was much more effective. After being thoroughly drenched by Zhang Yi, the punk's lips were all purple with cold. They hurried back to Chen Jinghao's house. Seeing them return in such a sorry state, Chen Jinghao was furious. "Where's that little brat? Did you bring him back?" His underlings were all scrambling for blankets and sheets to warm themselves. Their clothes were soaked and frozen solid. More than 10 people were fighting over clothes and blankets in the room. But because there were too many people and not enough supplies, several of them had no choice but to take off their clothes and huddle together for warmth. The scene was somewhat bizarre. This made Chen Jinghao furious, and he slammed his hand on the table. "Someone explain to me what happened." After regaining some body heat, the underling stammered out the whole story to Chen Jinghao. "That Zhang, he was too despicable. He sprayed us with a water hose. It was unbearable. The door to his house is incredibly thick. We smashed it for a long time, but only a little paint chipped off." After listening, Chen Jinghao frowned deeply. When he went to knock on the door himself, he did feel that Zhang Yi's door was very solid. It seemed that a forced entry would be difficult. But soon he sneered, "It doesn't matter. Even if his house is an iron turtle, there will always be a weakness. And I don't believe he can stay inside forever. A few of you stay nearby and watch. As soon as he comes out, beat him to death for me," Chen Jinghao said viciously. His underlings were all desperate thugs. Hearing this, they all shivered and sneered. Although they were frozen stiff, they still had to act tough. However, they never imagined that Zhang, he had no intention of leaving his home at all. Outside was hell, but his room was heaven. Why would anyone go from heaven to hell? After dealing with Chen Jinghao and the others, Zhang, he went back to playing his game. He knew that these guys wouldn't give up, but they didn't have the ability to break into his home. As for going outside, Zhang, he would never make that choice. He wouldn't take even a 1 in 10,000 chance. Wasn't it more comfortable to stay at home? A while later, Zhang, he went to the French window to check the scene outside. There really were people using tools to clear the snow. He seemed to see Uncle Yu, the security guard. This upright and enthusiastic retired soldier was always the first to rush forward when something happened. The dozen or so people downstairs were all relatively agreeable young people from the residence group. But there was no sign of Annie Lin and the other neighborhood committee members. They struggled to dig through the 2 to 3 meter thick layer of snow. However, Zhang Yi knew that this was completely futile. Just digging a path from downstairs to the gate of the community would take a whole day. But what then? The roads outside were also completely covered. Only professional, large-scale snowplows could slowly clear such thick snow. But in the south, there were no such professional vehicles. Going out had become impossible. What's more, in -70-degree weather, they wouldn't be able to last long. Their cold weather gear and physical fitness couldn't adapt to such low temperatures. Staying outdoors for half an hour continuously carried the risk of frostbite. Zhang, he shook his head. These honest people were indeed quite pitiful. But it was their own choice, and Zhang, he didn't bother to say anything. After all, it had nothing to do with him now. He just wanted to live a good life. It was afternoon. Feeling hungry, Zhang Yi took out a meal from his dimensional space. It was a simple meal. His space was full of such delicacies. Now that he stayed home every day, Zhang Yi's schedule had become more flexible. He slept when he was sleepy, ate when he was hungry, and didn't need to distinguish between day and night. The heavy snow outside continued to fall. Zhang Yi took a moment to look down at the building below. The snow shovelers had all gone back. The area they had painstakingly cleared was quickly covered by snow again. Perhaps they also realized that they couldn't fight against nature with their own strength alone. Zhang Yi lay on the sofa in his thermal underwear. The indoor temperature was a comfortable 27 degrees C. He turned on the TV and watched the programs. Many TV stations across the country had stopped broadcasting, leaving only some provincial channels and CCTV still on air. They were all broadcasting official work propaganda and encouraging slogans. At this moment, our eyes are on Xinjiang. The government is strategizing and commanding us to launch the final assault on the snow disaster. According to reports, due to ineffective snow disaster prevention and control, 200 million people have been affected and tens of millions have died in the United States. The development of the snow disaster in our country is under control, and everything is developing for the better. We hope everyone will not panic and trust the power of the government. Zhang Yi shook his head. The magnitude and horror of this snow disaster were unimaginable. Although the government was trying to solve the problem, human power was too weak in the face of nature. In the homeowners group chat, Mrs. Lin was still chattering away. Everyone saw the news, right? Our country is strong and fully capable of handling this blizzard. Don't panic. All problems will be easily solved. If anyone needs supplies, those who can help should try their best. After all, this blizzard will pass soon. There's no need to hoard supplies. However, very few people replied to her. Clearly, after 2 days, the blizzard showed no signs of stopping, making many people worried. Fang Yuqing messaged Zhang Yi again. Zhang Yi, are you okay? Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. Fang Yuqing probably thought he'd been dealt with by Qin Jinghao. However, he didn't think Fang Yuqing's concern was genuine. I'm fine. Oh, that's good. Fang Yuqing was actually a little disappointed. But soon, she said, we've run out of food. I remember you bought a lot of things. Can you give me some? I'll treat you to dinner later, winking face with Dong. A sneer appeared on Zhang Yi's lips. As expected, this woman definitely had an ulterior motive. He remembered that when he went to the supermarket last time, Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning also bought some things. Although not as much as him, it shouldn't have been enough to only last 2 days. Oh, you're talking about ages ago. I didn't keep those things at home. Actually, I don't have much left either. Fang Yuqing still wouldn't give up. Then can you at least give me a few packs of instant noodles? You're in charge of the warehouse. How could you be short on food? Zhang Yi was blunt. I really don't have any instant noodles. Look, this is all I can eat these days. He took a picture of the lobster and steak on his table and sent it to Fang Yuqing. Fang Yuqing's eyebrows shot up when she saw the picture. Damn, Zhang Yi, what do you mean? Are you deliberately trying to provoke me? Beside her, her best friend Lin Caning poked her head out from under the covers. Because it was so cold, they were sleeping in the same bed. Seeing the delicious food in the photo, Lin Caning's eyes lit up. These little fairies, as they called themselves, normally never cooked. They always ordered takeout or had men treat them to meals. These few days of heavy snow and city lockdown had starved them. They could only eat instant noodles and canned food, which they usually disliked. Seeing Zhang Yi eating lobster and steak, the two women were both angry and envious. Angry because Zhang Yi was enjoying himself alone and didn't think to share with them. Lin Caning immediately said sourly, "Wow, Zhang Yi is too much. He has all these delicious things at home and didn't even think of you. And he used to say he liked you. I think he's completely insincere." Fang Yuqing was also very unhappy. This wasn't the first time Zhang Yi had sent her photos. She knew he was deliberately provoking her. However, she believed Zhang Yi still liked her and was using this method to get her to give in. Stupid. You think you can make me your girlfriend with just a little food? Zhang Yi, you're so naive, Fang Yuqing said dismissively. As a proud gold digger, she had to maintain her aloof image. However, looking at the photos Zhang Yi sent, the desire in her eyes was undeniable. Lin Canning, of course, understood her. So she said, Yuqing, why don't you tell Zhang you'll have dinner with him? But he has to provide the food. That way you can save face and eat delicious lobster and steak. I'm sure he'll be so excited he'll agree immediately. Fang Yuqing frowned and thought for a moment. Zhang, he was just a high-grade backup in her mind. Although he was handsome and had some assets, he was still far from her ideal rich and handsome man. Normally, she would never lower herself. But now, she couldn't stand eating instant noodles and canned food every day. Fine, I'll give him a chance to dine with me, Fang Yuqing said reluctantly, pouting. She picked up her phone and messaged Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, it's been a while since we gotten together. Why don't you come over to our place for dinner tonight? Seeing the message, Zhang Yi laughed. You're inviting me to dinner? Great, thanks. This sentence made Fang Yuqing's face turn pale on the other end of the phone. Or maybe it was from the cold. She angrily said to Lin Canning, This Zhang Yi is simply ungrateful. I gave him the chance to treat me to dinner, and he actually wants me to be the host. Lin Canning was stunned. She hadn't expected Zhang Yi, who had always pursued Fang Yuqing, to suddenly become so inconsiderate. Strange, could a simp actually develop self-awareness? Fang Yuqing angrily threw her phone aside. She fumed. This Zhang, I was originally planning to keep him as a backup. Now he has to move down the list. I'm really angry this time. From now on, I won't say another word to him. Even if he comes begging, it's useless. Lin Canning, though craving the food, added fuel to the fire. Exactly, look at him. He wants to chase you, but he's so stingy. This kind of man deserves to be single forever. The two continued to curse Zhang Yi for a while. During this time, Fang Yuqing picked up her phone, thinking Zhang Yi would message her to apologize. But Zhang Yi didn't send a single message, which angered her even more. Meanwhile, Lin Canning had a devious idea. She secretly messaged Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi, how can you be so stupid? Yuqing is unhappy now. Do you know how serious this is? Zhang Yi habitually glanced at the message after receiving it. Reading messages from various chat groups had become a form of entertainment for him. What could be more fascinating than human nature in the apocalypse? Seeing that the message was from Lin Canning, Zhang Yi took a look and chuckled. Good cop, bad cop, right? You two are really dramatic. Zhang Yi had long seen through this green tea and white lotus combination. Usually, Lin Canning acted as Fang Yuqing's accomplice, because Fang Yuqing needed to maintain her pure goddess image. So, asking for gifts and hinting for men to spend money on Fang Yuqing were things Lin Canning did. Zhang Yi feigned ignorance. What's wrong? I didn't do anything bad. Lin Canning replied. Are you stupid? The city snowed in, and we've almost run out of food. Wouldn't bringing us some delicious food right now be the perfect way to show your loyalty to Yuqing? If I were you, I'd send over all the good stuff like steak and lobster. Yuqing would be so touched, and wouldn't that greatly improve your chances? Looking at Lin Canning's messages, Zhang Yi could already imagine the greedy look on the gold digger's face. He sneered. What was the difference between this behavior and begging? The funny thing was, even while begging, they still acted like they were doing him a favor. As if Zhang Yi giving them food was actually them giving him an opportunity. This kind of behavior made Zhang Yi want to slap them all silly. Despicable. Zhang Yi decided to play these two green tea bitches. He replied, but we're running low on food too. Just barely enough for me. Lin Canning frowned and immediately criticized him. Foolish. How many days can this snowstorm last? You can endure a couple of hungry days. And once you've won Yuqing over, wouldn't that be a huge gain? You're not even willing to part with a little food. I don't think you're truly sincere towards our Yuqing. Zhang Yi laughed even harder. These two women, one playing the good cop and the other the bad cop, were expertly manipulating him. Too bad Zhang Yi had been reborn and had already seen through their shameless facade. Faced with Lin Canning's manipulation, he simply replied with an "oh" and tossed his phone aside, ignoring her. Seeing that "oh," Lin Canning was instantly furious. Oh, what do you mean by "oh"? I've been talking to you for so long. And that's your attitude? Hurry up and bring the food over. I want to eat steak and lobster too. Lynn Canning was a glutton. She hadn't had anything good to eat in the past 2 days, and seeing Zhang Yi enjoying a feast made her mouth water. She originally wanted to use Fang Yuqing's name to trick Zhang Yi into sending over all the good food. But things were developing in a completely different direction than she expected. That almost broke her. Could it be? He was no longer interested in Fang Yuqing? No, that was impossible. Lin Canning recalled Zhang Yi's attentiveness to Fang Yuqing over the past few years and immediately shook her head. He must just be temporarily out of his mind. Annoyed, Lin Canning went to find Fang Yuqing and exaggerated the situation. Of course, she told Fang Yuqing that she had only approached Zhang Yi to get supplies for her. Now, if Zhang Yi wanted to be her lapdog again, he would have to properly apologize for what happened these past few days and spend a fortune to beg for her forgiveness. Lin Canning nudged Fang Yuqing. This Zhang Yi is clueless. Don't you have other admirers? Many of their colleagues who worked at the warehouse lived in their complex. Among them were Fang Yuqing's other pursuers, like Zhou Peng, who was the most devoted to her. Fang Yuqing naturally knew who Lin Canning was talking about. She curled her lip disdainfully. Zhou Peng wasn't even considered a spare tire. Although they both used to work at Walmart, Zhou Peng didn't even own a house in Tianhai City and was still renting. Fang Yuqing only used him to take advantage of small benefits and had no feelings for him whatsoever. Lin Canning persuaded, "It's so cold outside, and it's snowing so heavily. We can't go out to buy anything, so why not use him for now and let him run errands for us?" Fang Yuqing's eyes flickered, thinking that Lin Canning had a point. So she sent a message to Zhou Peng. Unexpectedly, in less than 5 minutes, Zhou Peng came running over with a backpack full of food. After all, he worked at the Walmart warehouse, and they often took discounted goods home. So naturally, he had some stock at home. With just one word from Fang Yuqing, Zhou Peng was like a chicken on steroids, specially picking out good things to bring her. Moreover, Zhou Peng patted his chest and guaranteed, "Yuqing, whatever you want me to do, just say the word. You know, for you, I can do anything." Fang Yuqing gave Zhou Peng a rare smile. "Thank you, Zhou Peng. You're so nice." With a few sweet words, she dismissed him. Then, back in her room, her expression immediately changed. "Teach, with your pathetic looks, you dare to have ideas about me? In your next life?" The atmosphere in the entire building began to gradually change. The extreme cold, even with the air conditioning constantly running, kept the indoor temperature below zero. This was something the Southerners of Tianhai City couldn't adapt to, and they weren't used to stocking up on supplies. 2 days of being frozen had emptied everyone's refrigerators. Although Mama Lin was still insisting that everything was fine and the snowstorm would soon pass, everyone had their own worries. But Zhang Yi, observing all of this, was quite happy. With the apocalypse upon them, he was fully prepared, and his life was even more comfortable than before it arrived. He was like an outsider, quietly watching the drama unfold. After being taught a lesson by Zhang Yi, Chen Jinghao and his lackeys hadn't come looking for trouble again. They also knew that Zhang Yi's home was not easy to breach, and Chen Jinghao's leg was practically crippled. If he couldn't get to a hospital, it would become a permanent disability in a few days. As for the other small fry, after being drenched, they all caught colds and fevers. Without a way to keep warm, dragging their sick bodies, they probably wouldn't die from lack of food but from high fever. At home, Zhang Yi spent his time playing games and watching the chat group. He also worked out when he had nothing else to do. After all, his home was equipped with plenty of fitness equipment, all international brands. Or he would read the various professional books he had downloaded online, such as the Barefoot Doctor's Manual and the Militia Training Manual. It was better to be safe than sorry. Mastering this professional knowledge might not be useful, but in case of emergency, it could save his life. Heavy snow fell outside, the sky shrouded in clouds, making it difficult to distinguish between day and night. On the morning of the third day, Zhang Yi got out of bed, holding a delicious Bianyafang roast duck while looking at the clock. "It's about time. The show is about to begin," Zhang Yi said softly. And just then, the mobile phone chat group completely exploded. 3 days after the apocalypse arrived, the real show began. Zhang Yi knew what would happen this day, so he hadn't slept all night, waiting for this good show. What happened was actually very simple. The power in the entire Yuelu community suddenly went out. And soon after, due to the chain reaction of the power outage, the water company was unable to supply water normally. The water supply system also malfunctioned, and every household lost water. All of this was within Zhang Yi's expectations. After all, at the beginning of the epoch, the authorities were still trying their best to support and resolve the snowstorm. But as time passed day by day, only on the third day did they discover that this was not a problem that could be solved by human efforts. Freezing cold, major hydropower plants successively shut down, and thermal power plants were also unable to continue generating electricity because the personnel could not work. After all the cities across the country exhausted their stored electricity, power outages were inevitable. At this time, perhaps only a few nuclear power plants were still operating. But the electricity generated was naturally all supplied to official departments. No water, no electricity. This instantly plunged the lives of ordinary people into darkness. Zhang Yi opened his phone and saw that many chat groups already had 99 plus messages. Do you have We also have no water or electricity. In such cold weather, the air conditioner is completely unusable and we can't use heaters. How can we live like this? Why aren't the authorities doing anything about this? If this continues, people will freeze to death. Zhang Yi shook his head silently. At this time, the authorities were unable to take care of everyone. To survive, you could only rely on yourself. He also knew that the apocalypse, from today onwards, had truly arrived. And after losing the electricity and food of modern society, humans would also fall into large-scale death. Thinking of this, Zhang Yi glanced at his home with lingering fear. When he saw his warm and spring-like, secure house, like a copper-clad iron bucket, and the endless supplies in his spatial dimension, a sense of solid warmth surged in his heart. The community owners group was also full of anxious complaints at this time. When will this snow stop? The air conditioner can't be used, and it's already over 30 degrees below zero in the house. If this continues, people will really freeze to death. The water is also cut off. Do they expect us to drink snow water? We don't have much food left, and the heavy snow is blocking the doors, so we can't go to the supermarket. What can we do? Someone started tagging Aunt Lin. Aunt Lin, didn't you say it was okay before? Yeah, I listened to you and didn't go out to buy supplies. What's the solution now? When will they come to save us? Say something. Facing the neighbors' questions, Aunt Lin's heart was also filled with anxiety and panic. At this moment, she was even more afraid than her neighbors. The owners didn't know how they would be rescued. But Aunt Lin had already received some news through the neighborhood committee. It's snowing all over the world now. It is said to be a once-in-100,000-year snowstorm. Perhaps we have ushered in another mass extinction, that is, the end of the world. Although the authorities are trying their best to support, it is impossible to take care of our country's more than 1 billion people. Several major cities in the country have already fallen. If we want to survive, we can only rely on ourselves. We must hoard more supplies, especially food and heating energy. I've already started going door to door asking for supplies in the name of the neighborhood committee. Isn't this harming people? Harming people? If I don't do that, our family will freeze and starve to death in 3 days at most. I can't care so much anymore. I don't know how many people will die in this snowstorm. I can only take care of myself and my family first. Yes, while we still have some influence, quickly get more supplies. At this time, survival is the most important. Aunt Lin stared at the messages in the neighborhood committee group chat, her whole body trembling violently. Although the indoor temperature had reached over 30 degrees below zero, cold sweat still dripped from her forehead. She lay in bed, covered with 3 thick layers of quilts, which were pressing down on her so that she could hardly breathe, but she didn't dare to lift them. Because the room was like an ice cellar at this time. At this time, her grandson Xiaohu asked in the quilt, "Grandma, why is it so cold outside? When will Dad and Mom come back?" Aunt Lin looked at her little grandson, her heart sinking. She had just chatted with her son and daughter-in-law today. They were both working out of town and were now trapped in their rented apartment. Not much better off than they were. I must protect my grandson and me. We must survive. Aunt Lin bit her lip hard, a ruthless look flashing in her eyes. Xiaohu, it's okay. Dad and Mom will be back in a while. After comforting Xiaohu, Aunt Lin picked up her phone and started speaking in the owners group. Everyone, the disaster is only temporary. The weather outside is too cold, and it's not surprising that the water and electricity are cut off. Don't worry, there are already staff working on repairs. The authorities have issued a notice that in this extraordinary time, the neighborhood committee will uniformly manage the community owners. I hope everyone will cooperate with our work. If anyone does not cooperate and causes serious consequences, we will ask the police to arrest and interrogate them afterwards. Aunt Lin's words were extremely harsh. These words aroused strong dissatisfaction among the owners. They didn't expect that at this time, the neighborhood committee not only didn't explain their ineffective work, but also threatened the owners. However, everyone was also a little afraid, and no one dared to object. Zhang, he held his phone and watched Aunt Lin's messages with amusement. He raised an eyebrow and let out a sneer. He knew Aunt Lin was lying. In the previous life, she used this despicable method to cheat a lot of supplies from others. But he didn't intend to expose Aunt Lin's tricks. Anyway, what did it have to do with him whether the other neighbors lived or died? Zhang Yi turned on the TV and continued playing his game. No water, no electricity. It didn't matter. His warehouse stored a massive amount of backup batteries, as well as generators, fuel, and solid alcohol. As for water, he had hoarded 500 tons of tap water alone, not to mention the tens of thousands of tons of mineral water and beverages in the warehouse. And if necessary, he could also obtain water by melting snow. In short, he lacked neither fresh water nor energy. Zhang Yi played video games while snacking on imported treats, living a comfortable life. The entire city of Tianhai, or rather, over 99% of the world, was suffering from water and power outages. The water shortage was somewhat manageable. Those who couldn't bear it could melt snow. But the power outage was unbearable. Modern people were fragile. Exposing them to temperatures of tens of degrees below zero was life-threatening. Zhang Yi's neighbors wailed in the building's WeChat group, fear driving them to seek comfort in numbers, hoping for a glimmer of hope. Chun Jinghao, whose leg Zhang Yi had previously broken, was nearly freezing to death in his apartment, his injury exacerbated by the extreme cold. His lackeys were even worse off. Though Zhang Yi had only sprayed them with a water hose. In this weather, they had no means of warming up. The indoor temperature gradually approached the outdoor temperature, reaching minus 50 or 60 degrees. Several of them developed high fevers, the lowest at 39 degrees Celsius, with several exceeding 40 degrees C. They hadn't stocked up on medicine, lacking even ibuprofen. Going out to buy medicine in this weather was impossible, so they could only endure. This was why Zhang Yi hadn't killed them outright. Letting them freeze to death in despair day by day was far more satisfying. Zhang Yi sat on the carpet, engrossed in his game. Outside, it was freezing, with howling north winds and heavy snow. Inside, it was a comfortable 27 degrees Celsius, brightly lit, with ample food, drink, and entertainment. If anything was lacking, it was a woman to keep him company. But Zhang Yi wasn't driven by lust. Having learned his lesson in his past life, his safety and quality of life were paramount. He wouldn't allow anyone into his safe house unless it was absolutely safe. In the apocalypse, human nature was unpredictable. He'd witnessed a woman kill her own husband for a pack of instant noodles. Just then, Zhang Yi's phone lit up. He picked it up with interest and saw that Mrs. Lin, the building representative, had tagged everyone in the group chat. Due to the blizzard, everyone's lives have been greatly affected. According to official notification, this snow will continue for a short while longer. To help everyone overcome this difficulty and live with dignity, the neighborhood committee will collect supplies from each household for unified distribution. This is an official directive. Everyone must cooperate. Those who are selfish and disobey will be dealt with later. Don't think you can defy our organization just because you're capable. Remember, you all have vulnerabilities. Zhang Yi sneered. The same old trick from his past life. Mrs. Lin, as a member of the neighborhood committee, had more access to information than ordinary people. She must have known about the impending apocalypse and the collapse of order in Tianhai. She was trying to use deception and intimidation to get everyone to hand over their supplies. But her methods were clumsy. After all, she was just a middle-aged woman with a limited education. Any intelligent person could see through her words. Even with rationing, the government wouldn't issue such an order. However, among the 50-plus households in their building, there were bound to be some who would be scared into obedience. Zhang, he decided to watch the drama unfold. Sure enough, Mrs. Lin's forceful demand for supplies pushed some people to the brink. Wang Min, who lived on the 15th floor and was also Zhang Yi's colleague, was a thrifty housewife known for bringing things home from the warehouse. Mrs. Lin's collection drive wouldn't spare her family. Wang Min protested. It's impossible to go out with all this snow. We barely have enough for ourselves. How can you collect everything and redistribute it? That's unreasonable. Another resident, Sun Jichao, added, everyone is struggling. It's not easy to have some food saved up. Confiscating it is going too far. Mrs. Lin pressed the voice message button hard, her voice tight. I've said it already. These are extraordinary times, and we need extraordinary measures. The snowstorm will be over soon. Don't worry. We're just redistributing resources. Many families have nothing to eat. Are you that selfish? Don't you care about your neighbors? Some families with fewer supplies naturally sided with Mrs. Lin. That's right, we're all neighbors. What's wrong with helping each other out? It's just some food and drinks. We can usually afford these things. It's just a special situation these couple of days. This is an organizational decision. If you don't comply, the consequences won't be pleasant. The WeChat group erupted in arguments. Zhang Yi remained silent, as did Fang Yuqing and Lin Caning. They had considerable supplies, but would never hand them over. Zhang Yi's amusement didn't last long. Though he stayed quiet, Mrs. Lin sent him a private message. Xiao Zhang, you work at the warehouse. You must have plenty of food and drinks at home, right? I remember you bought 3 cartloads of things last time. Now everyone is in trouble. It's time for you to show your spirit. Don't worry. We'll return everything once the snowstorm is over. Everyone will remember your kindness. Mrs. Lin had first created panic in the group chat and then started targeting individuals. If she could trick even one family, she could get some supplies to help her and her grandson survive a few more days. And Zhang Yi, the warehouse manager at Walmart, was in her sights. Zhang Yi sneered. In his past life, he underestimated the severity of the blizzard. Thinking he could earn some favor with his neighbors, he shared some of his hoarded supplies. But what was the result? Not only did he not receive any gratitude, but it made people think he had a large stockpile of supplies. Ultimately, he was killed after his door was broken down and became someone's food. It could be said that this old woman, surnamed Lin, was also partly responsible for his death in his previous life. The corners of his mouth turned up, and he lazily sent a voice message. That's great. We've run out of food too. Aunt Lin, when you've collected the supplies, please share some with me. Aunt Lin was so angry, she started cursing in her house. Bah! Who are you trying to fool? Your family must have hoarded a lot of stuff? Having worked in the warehouse for so many years, I don't believe your hands are clean. She was so certain because Zhang Yi often helped his neighbors buy discounted goods from the Walmart warehouse. For example, items with damaged packaging and soon-to-expire food would be sold at very low prices. As an internal employee, he had priority purchasing rights. Sometimes, the warehouse would even distribute them as employee benefits. Aunt Lin's face turned livid, and she gritted her teeth, still unwilling to give up. She had identified Zhang Yi as a big fish. As long as she could pry open his mouth, she and her daughter could get a lot of supplies, enough to live for at least another week. Aunt Lin took a deep breath and tried to speak in a gentle yet stern tone. Xiao Zhang, don't joke with Annie. Everyone knows you're a supervisor at the Walmart. This is an order from the organization. You must obey. You've made contributions, and everyone and the organization will remember your kindness. Be obedient. Send all the things in your house to Annie, and set an example. Zhang Yi picked up a toothpick. He had roast lamb leg for lunch, and some of it was stuck in his teeth. He said lazily, "I'm not lying to you, I've eaten everything in my house. These days, even landlords don't have surplus grain. Aunt Lin, give me a few packs of instant noodles." As a member of the neighborhood committee, you have to set an example and show some spirit. Zhang Yi retorted. Seeing that Zhang Yi was unmoved, Aunt Lin knew that a soft approach wouldn't work. She deepened her voice, and it became low and menacing. "Zhang Yi, can't talk to you nicely, huh? Do you think I'm talking to you in a personal capacity? I'm representing the organization. Your refusal to hand over your supplies is resisting the organization, and I will deal with you later." Zhang Yi sneered. "Bah! Representing the organization? You're really taking a chicken feather as an arrow. You're just a neighborhood committee worker, not even a civil servant, let alone on the government payroll. Usually, you can fool those old men and women, but you're still putting on airs with me. Are you stupid? Do whatever you can. I'll be waiting for you at home." Zhang Yi ruthlessly exposed Aunt Lin's true colors. Neighborhood committee staff are just social workers. They have no official positions, and they don't belong to the civil service. Moreover, Aunt Lin was just an errand runner in their neighborhood committee, not even a minor leader. Of course, even if she were a high-ranking official, Zhang Yi wouldn't give a damn about her at a time like this. After scolding Aunt Lin, Zhang Yi decisively hung up the phone and blocked her. Because this kind of shrewish old woman loved to curse, he didn't have the time to argue with her. His actions almost made Aunt Lin explode with anger. This Zhang Yi, repeatedly opposing her, rubbing her face in the dirt. How could she, who considered herself the leader of the community, tolerate this? "Zhang, you damn thing. I really want to kill you." Aunt Lin roared angrily, but she could only curse. In reality, she couldn't really do anything to Zhang Yi, as she was struggling to survive herself. She wanted to kick Zhang Yi out of the residents' chat group, but after thinking about it, doing so didn't seem to harm Zhang Yi. She also wanted to call on everyone in the group to collectively condemn Zhang Yi. But then, everyone would know that Zhang Yi refused to hand over his supplies. If everyone followed suit, she wouldn't be able to cheat anyone. No matter what, she couldn't do anything to Zhang Yi at this point. The more Aunt Lin thought about it, the angrier and more frustrated she became. But she had no other choice but to swallow her anger. The most urgent thing for her now was to deceive others. She had to try her best to trick them out of their supplies before they came to their senses. In the next 2 days, Aunt Lin managed to coax and scare some supplies from several families. But not everyone was a fool. In the apocalypse, everyone's priority was the survival of themselves and their families. Some people chose to ignore Aunt Lin with cold treatment. Others with more fiery tempers directly cursed Aunt Lin away when she came to ask for supplies. As for those who were not to be trifled with, like Chen Jinghao and Su Hao, she didn't even have the courage to approach them. Zhang Yi saw all these things clearly through the surveillance cameras. But he was busy enjoying himself and eating, so naturally, there was no need to meddle in other people's business. It had been 5 days since the blizzard started. Ordinary families only stored 3 to 5 days' worth of food. Because some people in their building worked at the large warehouse, they had slightly more supplies at home. But due to the severe low temperature, heating required fuel and food, so supplies were consumed faster. These days, a sense of hostility gradually began to appear in the chat group. The residents who were initially honest and waiting for official rescue began to change their mentality due to the lack of energy for heating and food. Especially those families who had been coaxed and tricked by Aunt Lin into giving away their supplies finally couldn't help but start questioning Aunt Lin in the group about how the supplies were distributed after they were taken away. At 25 hashtag 1 unit 1502, Lin Chunxiao Aunt Lin, you promised to distribute the supplies uniformly after collecting them, right? We've run out of food at home. It's been 2 days. Please give us some. Yes, you promised uniform distribution, so everyone has something to eat. The residents all clamored, including those who hadn't handed over anything before, also hoping to get a share. Aunt Lin seemed to have disappeared, with no response. Of course, she could see these messages, but at this point, she had no intention of handing over any supplies. In the entire building, only she and Zhang Yi truly understood what was happening. The outside world had fallen into chaos. Only with supplies could one survive, otherwise, it was just waiting to die. She hugged her grandson, huddled under 5 layers of quilts, and gritted her teeth. The supplies I worked so hard to cheat out of, how could I give them back to you? Seeing that Annie Lin wouldn't respond no matter how much they called her, the neighbors finally realized they had been tricked. The chat group immediately filled with kind regards for Annie Lin. But from the moment Annie Lin decided to deceive her neighbors, she had already abandoned all shame and didn't care what they said about her. However, someone had their eye on the supplies she had swindled, namely, the gangster Chen Jinghao. Although it had been 5 days since the apocalypse began, no one knew the true situation outside, so things hadn't yet escalated to the point of fighting over supplies. In Zhang Yi's memory, Chen Jinghao would later lead a group of thugs, robbing people and even resorting to murder. But right now, he hadn't yet resorted to robbery to seize supplies from his neighbors. After all, not all gangsters were crazy. He had a little bit of sense. Even with Zhang Yi, who had shot him in the leg, he hadn't tried to force his way into Zhang Yi's home without absolute certainty. Now his own supplies were dwindling. Gangsters like him weren't in the habit of stockpiling. He had plenty of beer in his fridge, but it was frozen solid. It wouldn't satisfy his hunger, and if he wanted to drink it, he'd have to smash it and gnaw on the ice. Annie Lin's actions gave him an idea. Annie Lin had said she would collect supplies and distribute them evenly. Although he scoffed at her words, it was now clear she had tricked some of her neighbors into handing over their supplies. This gave him a perfectly justifiable reason to take them. Even if things blew up after the snow thawed, Annie Lin wouldn't dare do anything because she was in the wrong. So Chen Jinghao picked up his phone and called Annie Lin. At that moment, Annie Lin was at home, happily enjoying biscuits with her grandson, Xiaohu. Instant noodles would have to wait until the short period of electricity each day to boil water. Suddenly, the phone rang urgently. "Grandma phone?" Xiao pointed at the phone. Auntie Lin snorted, her eyes full of disdain. She figured it was those neighbors she had cheated calling. She felt no guilt towards those fools. She thought they were all idiots. But when she picked up the phone and saw the caller ID, a look of fear crossed her face. Chen Jinghao? What does he want? Chen Jinghao was a notorious gangster, with many underlings and supposedly powerful connections. She, a small community worker, was no match for him. Annie Lin answered the call. Chen Jinghao's voice came through. "Hey, Annie Lin, you're quite capable, getting everyone's supplies into your hands." Hearing the word supplies, Annie Lin became defensive. She coughed. "Ahem, as a community worker, it's my duty to manage supplies for everyone." Chen Jinghao sneered. "Oh, that's convenient. Our family is short on supplies right now. Hurry up and send them over." Annie Lin's face stiffened. She hadn't expected this thug to extort her. She seemed to have forgotten that she had also used shameless methods to cheat supplies from her neighbors. Although she was afraid of Chen Jinghao, for her and her grandson's survival, she was unwilling to hand over the supplies she had obtained. She gritted her teeth and said, "I still need to sort these supplies out. Some families haven't handed theirs in yet, so I can't distribute them." Chen Jinghao was growing impatient. This Auntie Lin really didn't know what was good for her, trying to fob him off with such excuses. He roared, "Old woman, don't push your luck. You've pocketed those things, haven't you? I'm telling you, hand them over nicely, or else, I'll come and get them myself." Annie Lin's face paled, and she trembled, speechless. She had always been a bully to the weak and a coward to the strong. She was tyrannical towards ordinary residents. But how could she know how to deal with someone like Chen Jinghao? She could only muster the courage to say, "What do you want? I'm warning you, don't try anything funny. I'm a committee worker." Chen Jinghao laughed even harder. "Tui, what a load of crap. You really think you're someone important? If you don't give them to me, I'll come and take them myself." After saying that, Chen Jinghao hung up. Due to the extreme cold, he had called his underlings to his home. For one thing, More people meant more warmth. Secondly, many people had fallen ill after being doused with cold water by Zhang Yi and needed care. Third, as a gangster, Chen Jinghao had some brains. He realized the situation was taking a bad turn, so he gathered his men. If necessary, having people on hand would give him absolute control. But so many people needed to eat. He hung up the phone, called his underlings, and the group marched towards Annie Lin's home. Chen Jinghao used a mop as a crutch, a baseball bat in his other hand, and stormed to Annie Lin's door. Zhang Yi saw everything clearly through his surveillance cameras. Sitting in front of the TV, legs propped up on the coffee table, Zhang Yi munched on potato chips and enjoyed the show. "Oh, looks like we're about to see a dog-eat-dog fight," he chuckled. It was only the 5th day of the apocalypse, and there was already such a good show, and both sides were people he thoroughly disliked. Zhang, he was in a very good mood. Suddenly, he thought of those neighbors who had been tricked by Annie Lin. Based on his memories of his past life and his understanding of these neighbors, even after this incident, some would still fall for her tricks. There was no helping it. People always had a glimmer of hope, and due to thousands of years of Confucianism, Chinese people instinctively chose to obey Annie Lin, who represented the community committee. Just like that, they would be fleeced by Annie Lin bit by bit. Zhang, he stroked his chin. "I wonder what would happen if I posted what's happening here in the group chat." A mischievous smile spread across his face. That would be quite the spectacle. He pressed the record button. After arriving at Annie Lin's home, Chen Jinghao and his men started yelling, demanding she open the door. Yuelu community was a mid-range residential area, and every household had a security door. But as everyone knew, security doors were for thieves, not for forced entry. Annie Lin's home was not Zhang Yi's. Although Annie Lin was desperately trying to barricade the door, the supposedly secure lock couldn't withstand a group of desperate thugs. They smashed at it with baseball bats, steel pipes, and crowbars, quickly destroying the lock. It was clear this wasn't their first time doing this. Once the lock was broken, the table and sofa Annie Lin used to block the door offered no resistance. Through the camera, Zhang Yi saw Annie Lin's pale face, etched with terror. Zhang Yi soon heard Aunt Lin's blood-curdling screams. After Chen Jinghao stormed into the house, he slapped Aunt Lin hard across the face. "Old hag, for tricking the neighbors out of their supplies, I'm delivering divine justice," Chen Jinghao declared with a boisterous laugh. Aunt Lin collapsed to the floor, dazed and speechless. Chen Jinghao instructed his men, "Search the place. We're taking all the food and water. It's all hard-earned supplies from the neighbors. She doesn't deserve it." His men snickered and, with a wink and a nudge, swarmed into the kitchen and bedroom, ransacking every possible hiding spot in Aunt Lin's home. They quickly unearthed a large stash of instant noodles, bread, biscuits, bottled water, and other provisions. Aunt Lin crawled towards Chen Jinghao, weeping and clutching his leg. "You can't take everything. Some of that is ours. If you take it all, how will my grandson and I survive?" Chen Jinghao stared down at her coldly and sneered. "Not my problem. Get lost." With that, he kicked her in the face with his good leg. "Ah!" Aunt Lin shrieked like a stuck pig and fell backward. Just then, a shout erupted from the bedroom. "You bastards! Get out of here!" It was Aunt Lin's grandson, Little Tiger. He'd seen his hidden chocolate biscuits discovered, and his eyes were blazing with fury. He grabbed a fruit knife from a drawer and stabbed one of the thugs in the buttocks. In the extreme cold, any injury could be fatal. The thug yelped in pain. Seeing that he'd been stabbed by a child, his eyes burned with rage. Damn it. How could he show his face after this got out? "You little shit." Enraged, the thug kicked Little Tiger in the stomach with all his might. A full-force kick from an adult was more than the 6-year-old could withstand. He screamed, his small body flying through the air before crashing hard against the wall and slumping to the floor like a discarded rag doll. The scene brought to mind the saying, "Hitting someone is like hanging a picture." Chen Jinghao and the others roared with laughter. "Ha! Lao Wu, when did you get such good kicks? You sent that little brat flying. Impressive." Lao Wu, the stabbed thug, pulled the knife from his buttocks and boasted. "Pretty cool. Huh? You should have filmed that." Aunt Lin, injured herself, had been playing dead on the floor. But seeing her beloved grandson kicked so brutally, she cried out in despair, "Little tiger, my grandson!" and scrambled towards him. Chen Jinghao pointed at her and declared self-righteously, "This is the price you pay for deceiving your neighbors. I'm delivering justice." With that, the group, laughing heartily, left Aunt Lin's home with their loot. Zhang Yi watched this brutal scene unfold, his eyebrows raised. Seeing the despicable Aunt Lin and her family get their comeuppance was naturally satisfying. He felt no sympathy for them. However, this scene also signified the beginning of the end for civilized society in their building. More violent incidents were sure to follow. A crack in the ice, once started, spreads quickly. Too bad it doesn't have much to do with me. Watching them fight and kill each other over a little bit of supplies while I just lie around at home. How boring. Zhang Yi mused with a smile, lounging on his imported sofa. He then uploaded the video he'd taken to the building's residents group chat. The scammed residents were still cursing Aunt Lin in the group. Then they saw Zhang Yi's video. Seeing Aunt Lin's home ransacked, her and her grandson beaten, and their ill-gotten gains stolen, the residents rejoiced. Serves the swindler right. How Gu is awesome. That's how you deal with these kinds of people. That's the price of being a con artist. She tried to be clever and ended up losing everything. Hilarious. Though the scammed residents knew Chen Jinghao wouldn't return their supplies, they were still genuinely pleased to see Aunt Lin punished. Some even hailed Chen Jinghao as a hero, singing his praises. Hao Gu is mighty, a true gangster with a sense of justice. If it weren't for Hao Gu, we wouldn't have any recourse against such shameless scum. Hao Gu, be careful, that old woman is vicious. She might report you to the police. Some even worried about Chen Jinghao and offered him advice. This time, Chen Jinghao had gained both fame and fortune. He hadn't incurred the wrath of the residents, and he'd acquired a large amount of supplies. Watching the residents chat, Zhang Yi sneered and shook his head. They were completely oblivious to one crucial point. If Chen Jinghao could break into Aunt Lin's home and rob her today, he could break into theirs tomorrow. And as hope dwindled, that day would come sooner rather than later. However, the fact that the residents were still chatting cheerfully in the group indicated one thing. They still had some supplies left. Most families weren't as desperate as they claimed. Many residents in Yuelu community worked in the warehouse district and were accustomed to stockpiling supplies. Even those who didn't work there often bought discounted goods in bulk. A box of expired instant noodles, if rationed carefully, could feed a family of 3 for 4 or 5 days. So, even though it was difficult to stay warm and well-fed, they could still survive for a while if they were frugal. In his previous life, Zhang Yi had lasted a full month before being overrun and devoured by starving neighbors. Don't flaunt your wealth. Everyone understood this principle. They all cried poverty to avoid being asked for help. Of course, they were barely surviving. Quality of life was a distant memory. Zhang Yi closed the group chat. He retrieved a target from his interdimensional space and placed it on the wall. Then, picking up his crossbow and compound bow, he began practicing his shooting. Even though his safe house was a fortress, survival in the apocalypse demanded constant vigilance. Only by diligently practicing survival skills could he last until the end. Besides, target practice was a decent form of entertainment. As for firearms, he didn't need to practice. He had a gun association membership card and knew how to use them. While not a sharpshooter, simply possessing a gun was a powerful deterrent. He only had 100 bullets, which, unlike arrows, couldn't be reused, so it was best to conserve them. Aunt Lin's supplies were robbed by Chen Jinghao, and she and her grandson, Little Tiger, were also severely beaten. The old woman, forcing herself to stay conscious, could still move. However, her grandson, Little Tiger, had been viciously kicked in the stomach by one of Chen Jinghao's lackeys. A 6-year-old child couldn't withstand such a kick. His internal organs were damaged. In desperation, she could only plead for help in the residents' group chat, hoping someone could save her grandson. However, due to her previous deception regarding supplies, everyone was disgusted with her, and no one was willing to help. "Well, I know what I did before was wrong. But my grandson is innocent. He's just a child. Please save him." Aunt Lynn cried in the group, her voice filled with despair. The residents had no sympathy for her. Instead, some mocked her. Who knows if this is real or fake this time? Yeah, besides, we're not doctors. We don't have the ability to help you. If you hadn't cheated everyone out of supplies in the first place, would Hal have beaten your grandson? Ultimately, you brought this on yourself. Aunt Lynn cried hysterically. It's all my fault. As long as you can save my grandson, I'll kowtow to you. At this moment, a woman named Joe Cooter sent a message. Let me take a look at the child, but I can't guarantee I can cure him. Seeing Joe Cooter's message, Zhang Yi immediately pictured a tall, proud woman with a long ponytail. Zhou Cooter was a doctor at Tianhai City First People's Hospital. In the previous life, she used her medical knowledge to save many people. She was one of the few good people among the neighbors. She was usually somewhat aloof and didn't often speak in the residents' group. This time, seeing Little Tiger's life in danger, she spoke up. Aunt Lynn also remembered that there was a doctor in the community and hurriedly sent the child over, thanking her profusely. Half an hour later, Aunt Lynn's anxious voice sounded again in the group. Does anyone have hemostatic medicine, anti-shock medicine, and antibiotics? My little tiger needs surgery. Please help. I'll kowtow to you. Little Tiger was seriously injured. The kick had ruptured his liver. Although Zhou Cooter was a doctor, she didn't have that many medicines at home. Hearing Aunt Lynn's plea, the residents chuckled but remained silent. Who would keep these medicines at home? Chun Jinghao even added insult to injury in the group. How are you going to kowtow in the group? A flurry of ha-ha laughter followed. Aunt Lynn's voice was choked with sobs. As long as you can help, I'll kowtow now. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. Actually, he had all these medicines in his spatial dimension. However, he would absolutely not take them out to save Little Tiger. Firstly, in the apocalypse, medicine was as important as food, and he didn't want to expose himself. Secondly, he really disliked Aunt Lynn and that spoiled brat. Besides, with such a serious injury, even if he barely survived, he wouldn't make it through the long winter. It was better to keep these medicines for himself. No matter how Aunt Lynn pleaded in the group, no one came forward to help her. After a long time, Dr. Zhou Cooter sent a message in the group. She said she had temporarily stopped Little Tiger's bleeding, but it was only emergency treatment and wouldn't last long. He had to go to the hospital for surgery to survive. She also said that if anyone had an emergency, she could help treat them. A wave of flattery followed. Even Chun Jinghao and the rich second generation, Su Hao, diligently praised Zhou Cooter's benevolent heart. In the past, everyone wasn't very interested in this aloof female doctor. But now, everyone was afraid of death, so they all tried to curry favor with Zhou Cooter. Zhang Yi still didn't speak in the chat group, just quietly observing the situation. Fang Yuqing hadn't contacted him in the past few days. Zhang Yi was happy to be left alone, but he knew that this White Lotus would definitely come to him for help soon. She wasn't looking for him now, just to maintain her pitiful vanity. She always thought she was a superior woman and wouldn't take the initiative to lower herself to a man. Of course, except for rich men. But what about later? The snow was still falling, and the entire first floor was completely submerged. Now, let alone leaving the community, even wanting to leave the community gate meant facing 4 or 5 meters of snow. Running out of supplies was inevitable. At that time, with this White Lotus's personality, she would definitely come to Zhang Yi for help. A week had passed since the apocalypse began. 7 days wasn't long. But for a group of people enduring the severe cold, huddled in their homes every day, it felt longer than 7 years. At first, their hearts were full of hope. Now almost everyone recognized reality. The possibility of waiting for rescue at home was already slim to none, because they had learned through the internet that the whole world was experiencing a heavy snowstorm unlike any seen in hundreds of thousands of years. The entire world was submerged by blizzards, and even in some northern cities, the temperature reached -100 degrees. The blizzards were even heavier, and many cities were directly submerged. Although the officials were still encouraging everyone to unite and help each other to survive through the few remaining channels. But looking at the frozen city outside, everyone's hearts sank completely. Due to the scarcity of supplies, the problem's cause became increasingly acute. Aunt Lin's food had been looted by Chun Jinghao, and her grandson was lying in bed dying, driving her into a frenzy. She was ranting in the group all day, saying she was a community leader and demanding that everyone hand over their supplies. But now, everyone had learned their lesson and no one paid any attention to her. In the residence group, Cieli Mei, a mother living on the 12th floor, suddenly sent a message. Does anyone have any food left? My child and I haven't eaten for 2 days. I can buy it at a high price. This message caused a subtle change in the residence group. In the past, everyone thought the disaster would soon pass and the city would be unblocked. So, although there were food transactions, the price was only a few times higher than usual. But now more and more families were running out of supplies. At this time, food was life, the hope of survival. Soon after, someone suddenly said, I have a few packs of instant noodles left at home. If you need them, I can sell them to you. However, I want 1,000 yuan per pack. 1,000 yuan for a pack of instant noodles. This was unimaginable in the past. They probably didn't expect how much impact this transaction would have on the entire residential building. Zhang, he held his chin and looked at his phone, saying faintly, Interesting things are about to begin. Cieli Mei didn't reply, obviously still hesitating. At least now, people still held a glimmer of hope, believing that the snowstorm would pass. Then people would still have to live, still have to earn money. At this moment, Su Hao, the rich second generation who hadn't spoken in the group for a long time, suddenly popped up. I'll pay 2,000 yuan per pack. How many do you have? I'll take them all. Lin Hao, the rich kid, caused an uproar in the chat group. What? 2,000 yuan for a pack of instant noodles? I didn't hear wrong, did I? Hey, don't jack up the prices like this. I'm getting scared. Some people said shakily. The snowstorm will pass, right? There's really no need for this. His message was a voice recording, but his trembling tone revealed his inner panic. People hadn't completely given up hope. Every morning they opened their eyes, longing to see the snow stop, the sun rise, and life return to normal. But Cieli Mei, the mother, and Chun Hao, another rich kid, buying up food at high prices deeply struck a chord in their already fragile hearts. Someone put on a brave face and said, Don't joke around. 2,000 yuan for instant noodles? Do you really think it's the end of the world? Ha ha ha. It's just snowing a little harder. Winter came early this year. It's not a zombie apocalypse, so why the fuss? Seeing this message, Zhang Yi chuckled and shook his head. A zombie apocalypse? Don't compare that low-level event to this Ice Age apocalypse. Zombies are scary, but they can still be dealt with by humans. However, in the face of natural disasters, tiny humans are as fragile as insects before the power of the universe. They still don't know what kind of terrible disaster they are facing. Su Hao arrogantly said in the group, Don't worry about it. I'm rich, and I'm spending money to buy peace of mind, okay? If you want to sell, private message me. If not, then forget it. Su Hao pretended to be indifferent. But Zhang Yi could see that his indifference was a facade. In reality, he was already scared. Otherwise, he wouldn't offer 2,000 yuan for a pack of instant noodles. This wasn't hard to figure out. Although Su Hao was rich, worth hundreds of millions, in this apocalyptic situation, he couldn't even order takeout, let alone enjoy a luxurious lifestyle. Rich people may not be kind, but they're definitely not stupid. Realizing the severity of the crisis, Su Hao started buying up supplies from his neighbors at high prices. Cieli Mei, the mother, said excitedly, How can you do this? My family has no food left. Buying food is a matter of life and death. Su Hao said bluntly, I'm not robbing you. I'm just offering a higher price. It's their freedom who they sell to. What's it to you? Seeing Su Hao ignoring her, Cieli Mei cried in the group, Please help us. My daughter is only 9 months old. If I don't have food, I won't have milk for her. We'll both starve to death. The residents' group remained silent. At this moment, the selfish side of human nature was on full display. Su Hao was offering 2,000 yuan for a pack of instant noodles. Cieli Mei's offer was only half of that. The average salary in Tianhai City was only 5,000 yuan. who would be willing to sell their hard-earned supplies to her cheaply. Many people had privately contacted Su Hao to discuss trades. Seemingly realizing what was happening, Xie Li continued to cry and plead for help in the group. But still no one spoke up. Not even a single person offered comfort. After all, if you spoke up, Xie Li might think you were soft-hearted and latch onto you. The helpless mother burst into tears. She was struggling to take care of herself with an 8-month-old baby, let alone a completely dependent infant. Memories of Xie Li from his past life surfaced in Zhang Yi's mind. His impression of her wasn't deep, as she always presented herself as a weak mother. She used this to gain sympathy and trade for supplies to survive. However, one thing was strange. In Zhang Yi's memory, both she and her daughter survived and were doing well later on. Thinking of this, a sharp glint flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. This woman was definitely not as simple as she appeared. All things pink, when cut open, were black inside. After his death in his past life, she most likely got her share of the spoils. Zhang Yi understood that being a saint in the apocalypse was a death sentence. So he remained silent, choosing to observe Xie Li coldly. Too many people died in the apocalypse. He only wanted to take care of himself. As for others, if they died, they died. However, Xie Li's cries finally had some effect. Uncle Yu, the security guard, softened and finally agreed to share some food with her. Xie Li thanked Uncle Yu profusely, claiming she would never forget his kindness for the rest of her life. Through the surveillance, Zhang Yi saw Su Hao, using his wealth, successfully purchase supplies from many neighbors. The quantity wasn't much, but it was enough for him and his girlfriend to survive for a few weeks. Zhang Yi sneered. This is the last bit of warmth money can offer in the apocalypse. It wouldn't be long before people, as their supplies ran out, realized that money had become worthless paper, and supplies were the only true currency. By then, he wondered how many would regret selling their supplies. Undeniably, Su Hao had set a bad precedent in the residents group. And, since many residents in the 25 buildings of the complex were friends and colleagues, Su Hao's high-price purchases impacted everyone around him. When he set a high price for supplies with real money, everyone realized how scarce resources were. Everyone clutched their supplies even tighter. At the beginning of the blizzard, some people would kindly share and exchange supplies with their neighbors. But now, they were more miserly than Scrooge. The 10th day of the Ice Age apocalypse. At Fong Yuqing and Lin Caning's apartment, supplies were almost depleted. The two women, who used to be picky eaters and enjoyed high-end food, were now arguing over a pack of instant noodles. The food they had bought earlier, along with what the Simp Zhou Peng had sent, was almost gone. At this rate, they would starve to death in a week at most. Wrapped in blankets, they sat on the sofa, pale-faced, with an open pack of compressed biscuits on the coffee table in front of them. Lin Caning glanced at the compressed biscuits and said to Fong Yuqing, "Yuqing, this is our last pack." Fong Yuqing's eyes were filled with anguish. In the past, she wouldn't have let this coarse food near her delicate throat. But now, she ate every crumb, even picking up the ones that fell on the floor. Lin Caning continued, "There are 5 packs of instant noodles and 3 bags of ramen left. There's half a bottle of Lao Ganma in the kitchen, but the steamed buns and dried noodles are long gone." Fong Yuqing clutched her head in distress. Instant noodles, instant noodles. Those things don't fill you up at all." Lin Caning stared intently at her. "Yuqing, the situation outside is really bad. Do you think the snow will ever stop?" Fong Yuqing froze for a moment, then turned her head to stare blankly out the window. Through the frost-covered glass, she could vaguely see the swirling snowflakes continuously falling from the sky. 10 days. This snow had been falling for 10 whole days without a moment's pause. The second floor was completely submerged, making it impossible to go outside. The distant streets were deathly silent, with no sign of any official snowplows. Despair sunk deep into Fong Yuqing's heart. She didn't know how long this snow disaster would last, or even if it would ever end. Covering her eyes, Fong Yuqing cried out in anguish, "Ningning, what are we going to do? If this continues, we'll starve to death." Lin Caning gritted her teeth and asked, "Does Zhou Peng have any food left?" Fong Yuqing shook her head. I've asked him several times, even pretended I wanted to be friends with him, but I've completely drained him dry. There's nothing left. The last time he gave me 2 packets of ramen, that was his last bit of food. He's as thin as a zombie now. He definitely doesn't have anything to eat. Lynn Canning clenched her fists in frustration. Then, is there anyone else we can try? Look, we're both so pretty. If we just put ourselves out there a little, there must be men who would be interested in us. Fong Yuqing glanced at her with a hint of annoyance. Are you stupid? Everyone's treating their supplies like their lives right now. Even if they are attracted to us, they're not going to hand over their supplies that easily. Plus, it's so cold. Even if we offered ourselves to them for free, they probably wouldn't have the energy. A flicker of pain crossed Fong Yuqing's eyes as she spoke. Lin Canning didn't know that Fong Yuqing had already tried this method. She had attempted to use her beauty to trade for supplies with men. However, her standards were too high. She demanded that the man be won. 85 meters tall, a civil servant, and earned 50,000 yuan a month before she would sleep with him. As a result, even the 60-year-old neighbor next door had said, "You're too late. If you had come half a month earlier, I might have still been able to rise to the occasion." Lin Canning bit her lip, fear gripping her heart. As a somewhat attractive woman, she had planned to use her beauty as her last resort for survival. But the temperature was clearly an excellent suppressant for desire. Suddenly, the image of a man surfaced in her mind. She said to Fong Yuqing, "Hey Yuqing, aren't you forgetting you still have a simp?" Fong Yuqing knew exactly who Lin Canning was talking about. She pursed her lips and said stubbornly, "Humph, that stinky man, unless he comes crawling and begs for my forgiveness, I will absolutely not contact him first." She had contacted Zhang Yi a few times before, with the sole purpose of giving him an opportunity to bring her supplies and try to win her favor. But Zhang Yi's attitude towards her had been too cold, and he had even sent her pictures to deliberately provoke her. This had infuriated Fong Yuqing, and she had vowed to make Zhang Yi come and lick her feet. If she took the initiative to contact him now, wouldn't that ruin her image as a cold and aloof goddess? No, that was absolutely unacceptable to Fong Yuqing. If her image was ruined, how would she find a rich second-generation heir in the future? Lin Canning said, "Have you forgotten that Zhang Yi's family stockpiled a lot of food before? Even after a month, they must have more than the average family. As long as you go to him, he'll definitely agree to bring you food right away." Hearing about food, Fong Yuqing's heart was stirred, but she hesitated. "But he was so cold to me when I contacted him before." Lin Canning said, "You're silly. He must have thought he wasn't good enough for you, so he wanted to give up. After all, you were pretty cold to him a while ago." Fong Yuqing immediately became agitated. "That's all his fault. He's just a middle-class guy, pretending to be a rich second-generation heir, making me waste so much emotion on him," Lin Canning said with a giggle. "But he's a quality spare tire now, right? Isn't the purpose of a spare tire to use it when you need it? Just give him a little smile. Let the flame of hope rekindle in his heart. Then won't he be at your beck and call?"